Chapter 736. Wu Zhenjuan was making a lot of noise. Because they were closing in, many of the lead teachers had surrounded the two military tents. A lot of onlookers who didn't know what was going on crowded around them. What's going on? Is this an impromptu performance by the teachers? Someone asked. They had no idea that a bunch of people representing the foreign rebel group Night Chief had infiltrated their ranks. By the time most of the students came back to their senses, the situation was already effectively under control. Everyone, don't join in the fun, do what you have to do. This has nothing to do with you. Several of the lead teachers had taken the initiative to maintain order at the front, because more and more students were coming over to watch, and there was the possibility of unexpected danger. Dopey Gua and Super Chen drank the salted vegetable soup that Jai Yin had served them contentedly as they watched the situation from a distance. Super Chen elbowed Dopey Gua. What's going on? Does your uncle have any information? Dopey Gua frowned and replied, maybe it has something to do with foreign forces. Foreign forces? Super Chen was puzzled. Dopey Gua nodded. Every year, some foreign forces sneak into the remains. I heard my uncle say before that the country is going to crack down hard on them. But I didn't expect them to be so heavy-handed. It can be said that using musical weapons is quite insane. Next to him, Little Peanut pursed his lips and said doubtfully, is it really that bad? Dopey Gua, do you know why there are always some incidents in the music talent shows every year? Those people who look stupid and think they're good at singing go up to show off their voices, but in the end, their singing almost makes the judges flip their tables. Super Chin, why? Dopey Gua sighed. It's because they gained confidence from the musical weapons. Super Chin, Little Peanut, Wang Ling, speaking up to this point, Dopey Gua was suddenly a little curious again. Do you think there's anyone in our class who can sing well? I remember that we have a good singing class activity at the start of next semester. Someone has to lead the singing. At that moment, everyone turned to look at Wang Ling. Because Wang Ling had sung in class with a guitar before, and he had done a pretty good job. Wang Ling, Super Chen patted Wang Ling on the shoulder. Wang Ling, it's up to you. Anyway, you usually don't speak, so it's good to have a few more lines. Dopey Gua, this subject agrees. Little Peanut, this subject agrees. Wang Ling, President Dylan hadn't expected that they would be targeted from the start, and that the other party would treat them in such an inhumane manner. Although they had long heard that the song Wu Yifan hummed when Daoist Wu was bathing was a great weapon, they hadn't expected this Wu Zhenjuan, as Daoist Wu's disciple, to be so savage that he had even preserved his Shifu's dry voice when he was bathing. In an instant, President Dylan's expression changed drastically. You! If you dare to sing, we'll all die together. The music master, irascible Dharmaraja Daoist Wu, was extremely lethal. No one wanted to test him, not even President Dylan. This was a great killing weapon. As long as the recording was combined with a sound-amplifying magic treasure, it could be used. Wu Zhenjuan was already prepared for President Dylan's words, and he gave the signal again. SKR. 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 As soon as he said this, President Dylan saw the rest of the medical staff in the tent take out earplugs that they had prepared beforehand and put them in their ears. President Dylan, MMP. It turned out that it had all been prepared in advance. At that moment, the soundproofing barrier outside the military tent had already been set up. Next, as long as the dry voice was played, the rest of the people wouldn't be affected. Knock out a bunch of people first. With a smile on his face, Wu Zhenjuan directly threw a magic ball with sound and shadow into the military tent. The moment the magic ball hit the ground, it shattered like glass, and the voice of the legendary melody Daoist Wu Yifan finally rang out from within. It was just a recording of Wu Yifan's bath, but the moment the glass ball hit the ground, it actually turned into a powerful force that could shake the air. Visible sound waves spread out on the spot like pulsing energy waves, For a moment, the Night Chief cultivators covered their ears and rolled on the ground in pain. A few minutes later, the Night Chief members who had been disguised as medical staff were all tied up and carried out. Huaxiao Alliance had specially prepared the immortal binding rope for them this time. The more they struggled, the tighter they got, and it also suppressed their spirit energy. Done. Wu Zhenjuan clapped his hands. Wu Zhenjuan's heart was at ease now that this matter had come to an end. At the very least, he didn't have to worry about the students' safety anymore. His face was dark, and it was impossible to tell whether he was angry or not. He stared coldly at President Dillon. "You'll be detained for the time being. I suggest you tell us the truth. We've already applied to the international prison for your detention, and we should get a reply very soon." More than 10 years ago, Huaxiao Nation had specially applied to establish an international prison to deal with criminals who infiltrated from abroad. There were 3 international prisons in the world, and one of them was located in Huaxiao's capital, Jinghua City. In fact, the international prison had been established more than 10 years ago for the sake of today's plan. President Dillon grit his teeth and was very unwilling to give up. He had underestimated Huaxiao Alliance's determination to strike down this time. Ever since he had found out about the fake remains, President Dillon had felt that he should have been more cautious. Although they had infiltrated the remains this time, the other party had been watching them the whole time. This had been a huge strategic mistake. As Night Chief's commander this time, President Dillon naturally couldn't escape the blame. But right now, they still had a chance to struggle, and hadn't lost everything. Because just now, President Dillon had observed that there was one person who hadn't been caught, and that person was none other than that teenage killer, Ghosthead Blade, who had recently been in the limelight among Dark Network members, and was known as Numinous Mother's third disciple. President Dillon narrowed his eyes as he continued to ponder. Sure enough, hiring Ghosthead Blade at a high price back then had been the right decision, even though she was 10 times more expensive than the other Dark Network members. But sure enough, there was a reason for it. At least for now, Ghosthead Blade had become the last hope of the entire Night Chief village. But then again, the moment that Soundwave magic ball had been thrown, Ghosthead Blade had still been by his side. But how on earth had she escaped? President Dillon was stunned by Ghosthead Blade's swift and violent reaction. Chapter 737. This knife was extremely fast, and like a shadow, it instantly aimed at Wang Ming's thigh. It was very obvious that this was a planned attack. It wasn't meant to take Wang Ming's life, but purely to incapacitate him and then abduct him. At that moment, Wang Ming was waiting for Wu Zhenjuan's signal. He had thought that all the members of Night Chief as well as the Dark Network forces they had hired had been captured, but he never thought that one of them would slip through the net and come for him. This Ghosthead Blade had come and gone like a ghost. She had come prepared. But the head of state's reaction was equally fast. The moment the knife light broke open the military tent, the invisible head of state directly attacked without even revealing his killer move. Paw! He had actually caught a white knife with his bare hand, and directly smashed the flying knife to pieces. Looking for me. It was only at that moment that Wang Ming realized that he had been ambushed, and the expression on his face was very different. This person had actually been able to evade Wu Zhenjuan's Soundwave magic ball attack. Not only had he escaped unscathed from irascible Dharmaraja Wu Yifun's shrieks, he had also launched a precise surprise attack on Wang Ming. It seemed that this person wasn't an ordinary person. Wang Ming immediately issued an order to the head of state disguised as Number 001. Number 001. Capture him alive. It was only after Wang Ming gave the order that Ghosthead Blade, whose ambush had failed, was astonished to realize that there was actually an expert hidden in the military tent. Ghosthead Blade knew that she had been careless, but she was also well aware that this hidden expert was very powerful. Before she had launched the sneak attack, she had clearly scouted out the situation inside the military tent. The problem was that she had only sensed Wang Ming. A lead teacher actually had a personal bodyguard by his side. In a split second, Ghosthead Blade, who had initially been uninterested in Wang Ming, became very interested. Outside the military tent, Ghosthead Blade was hiding in a lush tree 100 meters away from Wang Ming's tent. She was holding a small Gothic umbrella with lace edges. After realizing that there was another expert in the military tent, she immediately pulled out the handle of the umbrella, cut her wrist, and smeared the blood on her left eyelid. Azura eye. When he opened his eyes again, Ghosthead Blade's left eye had changed. His left eye instantly turned red, and under the influence of the blood essence, there was a spirit array engraved inside. Azura eyes, this was the legendary ability that Ghosthead Blade relied on to become famous. It wasn't some strange eye technique. Instead, he had dug out the eye of a magical beast and transplanted it into his left eye to refine it. After the refinement was successful, the transplanted magical beast eyes would fuse with the human body. It would look normal under normal conditions, but once it was affected by the blood essence, it would immediately transform. Facing the mysterious and invisible expert in the tent, Ghosthead Blade felt that it was necessary to use this method based on his battle experience. But something unexpected happened. Ghosthead Blade discovered that even if he activated the eye of the Shura, he could only see an extremely blurry silhouette. He couldn't even see the person's face clearly. He could only vaguely sense a silhouette and a gaze, and the most terrifying thing was that the other party's gaze directly collided with hers, completely undisguised as he stared straight at her. This was the standard look of a hawk looking at a wolf. Ghosthead Blade broke out in a cold sweat. Who was this person? Ghosthead Blade was so frightened that all the pores on his body suddenly shrank. It was just a glance, but Ghosthead Blade was already scared out of his wits. But in the next moment, the figure suddenly moved. He launched a counterattack at a speed that Ghosthead Blade couldn't follow with the naked eye. A tremendous pressure instantly surged into Ghosthead Blade's soul. She felt as if a weight of 1,000 kilograms was hanging over her body, and she couldn't move even half a step from the tree trunk. When Ghosthead Blade came back to her senses, a large, thick, and strong hand was already pressing down on her shoulder. A true immortal expert, Ghosthead Blade instantly despaired. Although she didn't know exactly what true immortal level the other party was at, the fact that the enemy was actually a true immortal was truly beyond Ghosthead Blade's expectations. Who on earth was that Wang Ming? He actually had a true immortal expert protecting him at all times. Was this person the illegitimate son of Huaxiu's head of state? Ghosthead Blade broke out in a cold sweat. Now that she knew that the other party was a true immortal expert, Ghosthead Blade believed that she already had no strength left to resist, but running away had always been her usual tactic. So after recognizing the reality, Ghosthead Blade's first reaction was to break free from the head of state's control. Her shoulder was pressed down, and the aura of a true immortal was exerting on it, causing it to become heavier and heavier. Ghosthead Blade couldn't breathe under the pressure. This was a girl, but she was far more vicious than the head of state had imagined. This arm, I'll give it to you. Ghosthead Blade grit her teeth and pulled hard. Her entire right arm and right shoulder were torn off like beef jerky. Then, dragging her broken body, she swiftly fled, turning into a stream of light that scuttled into the distance. Holding Ghosthead Blade's broken arm, the head of state's eyebrows twitched. Although she was a woman, he hadn't expected her to be such a savage character. The head of state knew of the gecko art. This spell could simulate a gecko abandoning a part of its body to escape when needed, and the abandoned part would later regrow. This was a life-saving method. Many cultivators had learned this technique, but not many could use it proficiently. But the point was, this Ghosthead Blade wasn't using some gecko art. The other party had directly abandoned her arm and forcibly broken free. She's a ruthless person. The head of state threw away the broken arm in his hand and sighed softly. The next moment, he stretched out his hand and directly grabbed in the direction in which Ghosthead Blade had fled. Buddha's palm seal. A moment later, the head of state caught a flying stream of light, and Ghosthead Blade, who had been forcibly shrunk by a spell, appeared in his palm with a frightened expression on her face. Ghosthead Blade knew that she had run into a tough opponent today. This was a grade 7 advanced spell, and was the spell that the head of state was most familiar with and commonly used at this stage. As for the reason why the head of state had learned this spell, it had started when he had first encountered Father Wong's novels. When Father Wong had just started writing novels, the head of state had developed the idea of learning this spell because the updates had been very slow. Back then, the head of state had wanted to firmly grasp Father Wong in the palm of his hand and update his novels. Thus, Father Wong had played a very important role in motivating the head of state to learn this spell. Staring at Ghosthead Blade in his palm, the head of state considered whether he should show off other skills. For example, the small black room of heaven and earth, the wheel of sun and moon like shuttles. When the head of state thought about it carefully, he had really learned quite a few skills back when he had been waiting for Father Wong to update his novels and when he had urged him to do so. Chapter 738. It was very obvious that this was an almighty. Holding Ghosthead Blade in her hand in her shrunken form, she instantly felt a sense of despair. Was it all over? Then, she raised her head and finally saw the Almighty's face clearly. In the end, she was scared out of her wits. How could it be him? That young man wasn't even a cultivator, but he was actually this important to Washoe Nation. The head of state had personally come forward to protect him. This was simply unheard of. Ghosthead Blade knelt in the palm of the head of state's hand. She had been completely suppressed by that great divine power just now and couldn't move. "Who is this?" the head of state asked the command center with narrowed eyes. Very quickly, the head of state's internal headset replied, "Your Excellency, after investigation, this is a Dark Network Red SS wanted member called Ghosthead Blade." Ghosthead Blade. The head of state rubbed his chin. It seemed that he had heard this name before. This person is currently the most dangerous of all the Dark Network members on the run. After that old devil was arrested, this person's reputation in the Dark Network has skyrocketed. It was a little unexpected that Night Chief was able to hire her this time, President Chi said with a sigh. Now that Ghosthead Blade was under control, President Chi instantly felt a lot more at ease. The uncertainty he had been worried about all this time was this Ghosthead Blade. This was a Dark Network member they had overlooked. Before entering the real remains, all foreign forces and Dark Network members had been locked down. It was a mistake on the command center's part that Ghosthead Blade hadn't been counted, and it had almost led to a disaster. "Your Excellency, this Ghosthead Blade was my mistake." President Chi bowed his head and apologized. "It's fine. In any case, Little Ming is safe enough with me by his side. Everything is going according to plan." Gripping Ghosthead Blade in one hand, the head of state gave a thumbs up with the other. But President Chi wasn't relieved by these words. This was his mistake, and punishment was necessary, otherwise he wouldn't be able to convince the public. President Chi decided that after this summer camp was over, he would submit an application to have his salary deducted for 500 years deducted. "President Chi, Your Excellency Head of State, Ghosthead Blade is a wanted criminal who has committed numerous heinous crimes and is in contact with many dark forces. We have to watch her carefully. We also want to get some clues about the dark forces from Ghosthead Blade." Princeps quickly nodded. "Don't worry about that. I know what I'm doing. But you probably didn't expect that the legendary treacherous Ghosthead Blade is actually a girl." "A girl?" President Chi was blank. Part of the reason why Ghosthead Blade was so difficult to capture was because of his appearance. Many people's impression of Ghosthead Blade was that he was a tall and skinny man who was as thin as firewood and extremely gloomy. This image originated from the profiling of Ghosthead Blade after many psychologists analyzed his crimes. Back then, these profilers' descriptions of Ghosthead Blade were surprisingly consistent. But now, after capturing the real person, Ghosthead Blade's image was completely changed. President Chi had a feeling that if Ghosthead Blade's arrest was exposed by the media, it would definitely be sensational news. President Xi frowned and replied to the head of state through the command platform, "Your Excellency, head of state, you can't be soft-hearted just because the other party is a woman. This person is ruthless and crafty. Don't worry, I have tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex," Princeps said. A few minutes later, the head of state suddenly cried out in alarm from the command center. "Ah! President Xi, Your Excellency, head of state, what's wrong?" "Princeps, when I was talking to you just now, I forgot that I was holding Ghosthead Blade. I used a little force." President Xi took a deep breath. "Is she still alive?" Princeps, already turned into paste, President Xi. After that, disguised as head of state 001, the head of state returned to Wang Ming's side with Ghosthead Blade's paste. Shockingly, it was another living pile of human scum, Wang Ming. For some reason, Wang Ming felt that this scene was familiar. Among the first batch of Shadow Stream killers who had broken into number 60 high school, it seemed that Wang Ling had turned one of them into human scum. Sure enough, when Almighties took action, did they all have a special obsession with paste? Wang Ming stared at the paste on the ground and sighed deeply. Wait a minute, but all of a sudden, he seemed to think of something. Speaking of Almighties taking action, Wang Ming thought of something that sounded very nonsensical at first, but was in fact very likely to happen. If Wang Ming had designed Head of State 001, he shouldn't have been so heavy-handed. Head of State 001's power system was jointly operated by the Heavenly E satellite. He had given the order to capture Ghosthead Blade alive just now, so the system would definitely control the power output. Even if Ghosthead Blade was crippled, it wouldn't go so far as to crush him into paste. So to sum up, there was only one truth that Wang Ming could think of at that moment, recalling the various abnormal reactions of Head of State 001 earlier. Wang Ming instantly broke out in a cold sweat. This head of state, it couldn't be the real head of state, right? If that was the case, then this head of state should have been switched before entering the remains. At this speculation, Wang Ming took a deep breath. No, even if this was the real head of state, he absolutely couldn't see through it. This was a big leader. If he exposed a leader in public, what peaceful days would he be able to live if things got ugly for him in the future? On the other side, the head of state also felt a little uncomfortable under Wang Ming's stare. He steadied his expression as much as possible, tensing every muscle in his face. It was actually the head of state himself who had come up with this plan to swap the raccoon for the crown prince, and he was very confident in his disguise. Now, the real head of state 001 should have already disguised himself as President Han Di, who had escaped from the vaccine company, and infiltrated Night Chief. The head of state thought that his disguise was flawless, but at that moment, he felt that Wang Ming in front of him seemed to have already sensed something. Naturally, the head of state was gratified at first. The person standing in front of him now was Wisdom Saint's disciple, the nation's most powerful brain. Furthermore, he was the only existence today who could possibly surpass President Xi in terms of intelligence. Wang Ming's intelligence kept increasing every year. It was only natural that the most powerful brain like this would find some flaws in him. The head of state comforted himself in his heart. Looking at Wang Ming's doubtful expression, the head of state did his best to remain calm. No, even if he had really been discovered, he had to continue pretending. He was the head of state. If he was exposed in public, how humiliating would that be? Chapter 739. It was still July 31st on Monday in the 15th week of the semester. It had originally been an evening picnic. The plan for the Foreign Force Night Chief and its spontaneously hired Dark Network members to infiltrate the real remains had ultimately ended with all of them arrested and one person turned into paste. But Wang Ling had an ominous feeling that things weren't that simple. That night, Wang Ming received a new task from the command center, which was to collect a DNA sample from Ghosthead Blade, who had turned into paste, for a data comparison to confirm his true identity. It would have been very easy to compare the data with Head of State 001. He just needed to take a bit of paste and stuff it into Head of State 001's mouth, and it would automatically identify it based on the built-in database in its body. But the current situation was that this Head of State 001 was the real Head of State. Even if Wang Ming had 1,000 guts, there was no way he could stuff paste into the real Head of State's mouth. So in the end, he still had to do it himself. He had sent the Head of State away and had him enter patrol alert mode. Furthermore, Wang Ming had no intention of summoning him back until the end of this summer camp in the remains. When was work the most stressful? Of course it was when the boss was around. Huaxiao Nation's Research Institute was an official organization, so who was its boss? Old Qi? Of course not. Come to think of it, Old Qi himself was also a part-time worker. The Head of State was the final big boss. But Wang Ming really never expected the Head of State to take number 001's place in this summer camp. The Head of State had disguised himself very well, but he had also revealed some flaws. If Wang Ming hadn't noticed these flaws, it was very likely that he would still be in the dark now. So the question now was, where on earth had Head of State 001, which he had invented, run off to carry out its mission? But Wang Ming reckoned that Old Qi was the only one who could answer all of this. Even if Old Qi wasn't the mastermind, he definitely had the right to be able to trick Wang Ming and almost screw him over so miserably. Wang Ming had almost become the laughingstock of the entire research institute. Wang Ming stared at the paste in front of him and wiped at his sweat as he pondered. The more he thought about it, the more afraid he felt. Fortunately, he had been quick-witted. Then, Wang Ming took out a small silver-gray magic ball and activated it with the spirit energy stored in the ring. The magic ball spun in the air like a top, and then it swiftly split into 8 mechanical arms like a crab. This was an all-purpose experimental assistance robot invented by Wang Ming, codenamed Crab. Prepare to take samples. Wang Ming gave the order, and the crab immediately stretched out its mechanical arm to scan the whole blob. As a result, the crab's spherical body immediately turned red after scanning the paste. It was a warning color, indicating that there might be foreign objects in the sample. Then, Wang Ming saw one of the crab's mechanical arms instantly transform into a pair of forceps, which then pulled out a pitch-black blade from the paste. This is... Wang Ming was almost instantly on high alert. He had a feeling that this blade was dangerous. However, in the next breath, the blade actually turned into a stream of light and flashed in front of his eyes. When he came back to his senses, there was already a knife mark on his cheek, on guard. Wang Ming broke out in a cold sweat. He knew things wouldn't be so simple. As an assistant, the crab naturally had the ability to defend itself to a certain extent. After Wang Ming gave the order, the crab immediately stretched out its mechanical arms to try and control the blade. The mechanical arms stretched out extremely quickly, but the small blade was even faster. The crab's back swing was too long. With 2 metallic clangs, the crab's 2 mechanical arms were instantly cut off. Wang Ming grit his teeth. It now looked like things were starting to get dangerous and troublesome. Perhaps this pitch-black blade had been left behind by Ghost Head Blade. It was like a venomous snake. Even after it was beheaded, its head would still retain a powerful venom, and one could be bitten if they were the slightest bit careless. But the next scene made Wang Ming feel that his thinking had been a little too simple, because this blade actually spoke. That lord is finally no longer by your side. The pitch-black blade opened its mouth. It wasn't Ghost Head Blade's voice, but it had the same tone as Ghost Head Blade's. Wang Ming narrowed his eyes and broke out in a cold sweat. You are. I am Ghost Head Blade. The small pitch-black blade continued to speak. No one knows that this is my true body. I once sold my soul to the artifact spirit of an ancient blade and became a fragment like this. As for the body you see, it's just my host. Unfortunately, that cute little loli has the highest compatibility rate among all the hosts I've found. In the end, that lord slapped her into a paste. Wang Ming, speaking up to this point, the small blade gave a cold smile. Hee hee. But that's fine. In any case, that little loli doesn't have much time left before her expiration date. The key is to find the next body. Wang Ming was startled. This actually had an expiration date. I thought that the kid you shared a room with before was pretty good. Then go look for him. Why are you looking for me? This time, it was Ghost Head Blade's turn to be startled. Wasn't that person his student? How could a teacher be so shameless? No wonder Huaxiao Alliance had been unable to determine Ghost Head Blade's true identity. As long as the other party kept changing hosts, there was nothing Huaxiao Alliance could do. In some sense, Ghost Head Blade's method was even more troublesome than that Myriad Faces old man, who was an expert in disguise among the Dark Network members. That was to say, even if Wang Ming could detect the DNA in that paste, he still wouldn't be able to pinpoint Ghost Head Blade's true identity. Ghost Head Blade, alright, now that you know everything about me, if you don't want me to kill you, you have two choices. Wang Ming suddenly wrapped his arms around his chest. What do you want to do to me? Ghost Head Blade composed himself and said to Wang Ming, first, use your skills to unlock Night Chief and all the Dark Network members. Second, you become my new host. I'm so weak, you want me to? That's not very good. Wang Ming's eyes widened in astonishment. The host's ability isn't the key. As long as you sign a host contract with me, even if the host is just an ordinary person, you can obtain cultivation abilities. The only drawback is that if an ordinary person becomes the host, the body's shelf life will be greatly reduced. All the more reason I don't recommend you choose me as your host. At that moment, Wang Ming suddenly looked at Ghost Head Blade seriously. Ghost Head Blade. Wang Ming spread his hands. I'm afraid your IQ won't keep up. Ghost Head Blade. Chapter 740. At this time, all the classes were writing their summer camp diaries in their tents. This was a task assigned to them by the teachers leading each team. All the students participating in this summer camp had to write down their reflections on the road in a diary of at least 1,000 words. This was the same as the military training diary from the 6 schools' joint military training exercise, but it was different from an ordinary military training diary. Because this summer camp diary counted for points. The key to getting high marks was to write down some of the reflections on the spirit plants they had seen on the road, including some theories on how they could be used after understanding their pharmacological effects. To put it bluntly, it was a competition to see who had the biggest brain holes. The summer camp diary's overall score accounted for 50% of the total score for the entire summer camp activity. Hence, everyone had to pay attention to it. Dopey, what are you writing? Can you let me have a look after you're done? Super Chen had always been weak in liberal arts. Inside the military tent, he bit a pen in his mouth and held the diary in his hand, feeling like he didn't know where to start. Writing was the most difficult thing. Furthermore, it had to be 1,000 words. It was one thing to hold it back in high school, but Super Chen reckoned that if he entered university and entered a major that had nothing to do with liberal arts, he might not even be able to squeeze out 500 words. I'm also thinking about a theme. It's a little complicated. So I'm going to start with a political perspective for the first day's diary. Dopey Guo was the political class representative, and was good at criticizing the current situation. The most important thing was that he had a lot of gossip on hand, so he didn't have to worry about not having something to write about. It was just that whether what he wrote was up to standard and whether it was of good quality was another matter. But writing a summer camp diary in the form of a political class essay had to be done carefully. Otherwise, he would have to take responsibility if there were any deviations in the report in the future. If you don't have a theme, you can ask Lotus Sunday. Her tent is very lively, and a lot of people go there to ask for advice. Little Peanut was halfway through writing when he heard that the two of them still hadn't decided on a theme, so he hurriedly said this. Super Chin, Lotus Sun. Dopigwa, it's very normal for Lotus Sun to know. Every year, there are experts sent by Huagwo Water Curtain Group in the scientific research team. These experts were originally from the Research Institute, and were then hired by Huagwo Water Curtain Group at sky-high salaries. Our country's only 5th-grade spirit medicine laboratory was jointly built by Lotus Sun's family and the Research Institute. Huagwo Water Curtain Group invests a lot of money every year in the cultivation of spirit plants and the refinement of pills. Super Chin Sked. According to Dopigwa's explanation, Lotus Sun clearly had plenty of opportunities to secretly take supplementary lessons. Furthermore, it was likely that she would major in pharmacology when she entered university. As the eldest daughter of Huagwo Water Curtain Group, she had a very heavy burden on her shoulders. Speaking up to this point, Dopigwa pulled open the curtain to take a look. Sure enough, there were students from various schools crowding outside her tent. Lotus Sun's good looks had always made her very popular. Some of them had come to ask questions, while others had naturally come to harass her. Super Chin pursed his lips. I'm afraid these people are wasting their time on Lotus Sun. I keep thinking that student Lotus Sun already has someone she likes. After saying this, Super Chin looked at Wang Ling for some reason, which made Wang Ling's hand tremble and he break his pen. Little Peanut, Lotus Sun has someone she likes. It should be. Super Chin actually wasn't too sure. And I think this person is in our class. Wang Ling, while the two of them were talking, Dopigwa came back from outside the tent with a shocked expression on his face. Little Peanut, what's wrong? Dopigwa, Lotus Sun will definitely get full marks for her diary this time. Guess what the title of her diary is? Wang Ling, Super Chin and Little Peanut. Dopigwa, my world's top 500 companies' dad's tutoring on spirit plants. Wang Ling, Super Chin, Little Peanut, everyone was busy writing in their diaries, and Wang Ling's wasn't going well either. It wasn't that he didn't know how to write, but that he always felt uneasy when he wrote. Suddenly, he raised his head. He had a strong feeling that Wang Ming was going to be in danger. Apart from the omen dream, all of Wang Ling's danger warnings were targeted at individuals. But there were times when brothers really did have a very strange connection, even if Wang Ming and Wang Ling weren't biological brothers, and were only cousins. But at the end of the day, the bloodline of the Wang clan flowed through his veins. This signal of danger was very strong, and almost instantly made Wang Ling nervous. He hurriedly looked in the direction of Wang Mingjuan's tent, and sure enough, he sensed killing intent permeating it. He was about to get up, but in the next moment, the world in front of him became clear, and he was actually sucked into a dark space. A moment later, a ray of golden light appeared in front of Wang Ling. It gathered bit by bit in front of him and finally coalesced into a person he was familiar with. Wang Ling hadn't expected the Heavenly Tao Golden Man to show up on its own. The Golden 3-inch Man said, "This is the Heavenly Tao space." Wang Ling sat down cross-legged and stared at the Golden 3-inch Man who was the embodiment of Heavenly Tao. He didn't quite understand what the Golden 3-inch Man was trying to do. His mind-reading ability couldn't work on Heavenly Tao. This was because the Heavenly Tao itself was in existence without emotions. The Golden 3-inch Man, the purpose of my trip here is to warn you that it's best if you don't make a move. Cupping his chin, Wang Ling instantly understood the Golden Man's purpose in coming here. He was probably talking about Wang Ming. The Golden 3-inch Man, this is a tribulation he has to experience in his life. If he can successfully overcome it, the heavens will bless him. But if he is obstructed by external forces, the tribulation he will encounter in the future will be even more troublesome and troublesome. Going against the heavens will never end well. Wang Ling said telepathically, so this is a notice. The Golden 3-inch Man, you can think of it that way. I just hope that things don't develop to the point of no return, otherwise it'll be too late for regrets. For the first time, Wang Ling felt that the heavenly Tao was quite considerate. Wang Ling carefully sized up the golden 3-inch man in front of him and seemed to have noticed something, so he asked telepathically, "You seem different from the heavenly Tao golden man I've seen before." The golden 3-inch man instantly broke out in a sweat. Back at the Heavenly Tao conference, he had already said that this guy in front of him was extremely dangerous. Now that he had come into contact with him, the golden 3-inch man felt even more apprehensive. After a brief silence, he confessed, "The person who made an equivalent transaction with you before was my dad." Wang Ling was startled. The Heavenly Tao actually had a family, the golden 3-inch man. "My dad should have informed you that you were going to make a move, but he didn't want to, so my grandfather beat him up. Now, I'll be the one to inform you." "Wang Ling, do all of you look the same?" The golden 3-inch man was silent. "We're not exactly the same, we're called golden 3-inch men. But a lot of people don't know what it means to be a golden 3-inch man." Wang Ling. The golden 3-inch man, "Indeed, we're all 3 inches tall, but there's still a difference between the Tower of Babel. The older the heavenly Tao, the longer it is. Of course, it's usually withdrawn into the abdomen." Chapter 741. When Wang Ling opened his eyes again, he was still in the tent. In other people's eyes, he was just in a daze. The heavenly Tao space was a kind of godly domain that ordinary people couldn't touch at all. Wang Ling hadn't expected that the heavenly Tao would actually personally appear this time to tell him not to interfere. At that moment, Wang Ling's gaze fell on Wang Ming, whose military tent was already brimming with murderous intent. Because he had received the heavenly Tao's notice, Wang Ling gave up on his plan to make a move. He tore off a piece of the diary and folded it into the shape of a paper crane. In fact, this was a life talisman that could be used to save Wang Ming's life when his life was in danger. However, the number of times the life talisman could be used was limited. It could only be used on the same person once every 49 days. If the heavenly Tao told him not to make a move, then he wouldn't make a move. It wouldn't be a problem if he helped him out in secret, right? This was what Wang Ling thought. While Wang Ling was still thinking, Super Chen's head suddenly poked over. He had wanted to see what theme Wang Ling had chosen for his summer camp diary, but when he looked over, he realized that Wang Ling was actually folding a paper crane, and his face instantly filled with despair. It's over, it's over. I'm afraid we're all going to fail this essay. Dopigua, why are you so pessimistic? Super Chin, Wang Ling has always been the equal share king in our class. Now that the equal share king is at his wit's end with this essay, we're definitely screwed. Look, Wang Ling is so bored that he's folding a paper crane. Wang Ling, Dopigua took a look and commented, you don't say. Wang Ling's paper crane is pretty nice to fold. His little heart is quite deft with his hands. Wang Ling, inside the military tent, Ghosthead Blade was already intent on killing Wang Ling. This wasn't just an act of revenge. Because the body of his previous Lolita had already been beaten to a pulp. If he didn't find a new host within 3 days, he would be directly destroyed by the lightning tribulation as punishment. Thus, Ghosthead Blade was determined to get this Teacher Wang. In a situation where the original host's body had been beaten into a paste, his battle prowess had already been greatly reduced. There were many Foundation Establishment stage students here, but it was clear that the importance of those students was far inferior to this Teacher Wang. The person in front of him was an existence that was personally protected by that lord. Ghosthead Blade still couldn't quite believe it, but the head of state's action was already enough to prove Wang Ming's significance and value. Moreover, Ghosthead Blade had already set up a barrier. All movements and killing intent within the range of the military tent would be completely blocked. As an ordinary person, Wang Ming couldn't get out at all. Making up his mind, Ghosthead Blade decided to take action immediately. The saber light was extremely fast. In this situation, the other party was definitely not willing to become his host, so there was only one way: forcefully parasitizing. And this method was to kill the person who was about to become the parasite first. This stab was aimed directly at Wang Ming's heart. Against an ordinary person, there was no need for flashy skills. The best way to deal with them was to aim at their vitals and kill them in one hit. Wang Ming stared at Ghosthead Blade and smiled. "It won't be so easy for you to kill me, go to hell." The moment it pierced Wang Ming's chest, Ghosthead Blade's heart was filled with joy and excitement. His true form was a pitch-black dagger, and when it was stained with blood, Ghosthead Blade instantly felt extremely comfortable, as if he was soaking in a hot spring bath. But in the next moment, something unexpected happened. Wang Ming, who had already been successfully hit in his vitals, didn't fall, but actually turned into a wisp of sand in front of Ghosthead Blade and disappeared into the air. The next moment, Wang Ming's figure reappeared in another part of the tent. This was Wang Ming's brain deduction technique. "Wang Ming, it won't be so easy for you to kill me." This was Ghosthead Blade's first time seeing this technique, and he was indescribably amazed. This didn't look like an illusion spell, and it couldn't be one at all. The young man in front of him didn't have any spirit energy in his body, so how could he cast an illusion spell? The only explanation was that his mind had been controlled. "It seems that you have a very high intelligence." Ghosthead Blade stared at Wang Ming and picked up on some clues. He was very experienced and knowledgeable, and could think of the only possibility that could happen to an ordinary person. As long as an ordinary person was intelligent enough, they could use a technique to control other people's brains and create illusions. Ghosthead Blade had first learned about this technique when Wisdom Saint President Qi had battled the demon gods back then. It was just that Ghosthead Blade hadn't expected Wang Ming to actually know this technique. To be exact, this could also be considered a spell, but it didn't consume spirit energy, and was controlled purely with mental energy. Now, Ghosthead Blade suddenly understood why Wang Ming was so valued. This man's entire brain was a treasure. "I was careless, but this technique consumes a lot of mental energy. How much longer do you think you can last?" Ghosthead Blade sneered from the small pitch-black blade floating in the air. This had hit Wang Ming's sore spot. This was the second time in recent times that he had used the brain deduction technique. The last time was chapter 348. But this battle was different from the previous one, which was when Wang Ming had come prepared. At that time, Wang Ming had deliberately cast the spell ahead of time to cover the entire area. But now, he was using the brain deduction technique in a critical situation. That was to say, no matter how Wang Ming used the spell to avoid Ghosthead Blade's attack, he couldn't leave the military tent. And it just so happened that Ghosthead Blade had some understanding of this technique of his. As Ghosthead Blade said, as long as this battle dragged on, Wang Ming would definitely lose. When President Qi had used the brain deduction technique back then, he had used spirit energy and mental energy to share the damage to the brain deduction technique's mental energy. But Wang Ming couldn't do it. He remembered that the last time he had used this technique, he had instantly fainted because he had overused his brain. Thus, this wasn't a long-term solution. Wang Ming stared at Ghosthead Blade warily. Given the current situation, he could only take a gamble. He shouted, "Someone! Save me!" Ghosthead Blade sneered. "I've set up a barrier around this military tent. No one will come to save you." But before Ghosthead Blade's laughter died down, light suddenly surged from the ground of the military tent. Ghosthead Blade was alarmed. "This is an invisible teleportation array." The next moment, a beautiful figure directly broke through the ground. This teleportation formation was buried underground by Jai Yin. As a qualified bodyguard, Jai Yin fully utilized her omnipresence to the extreme. Wang Ming was delighted to see Jai Yin appear, but he also couldn't help being startled. "What the hell, you're really here?" Jai Yin grit her teeth. "I've been waiting for you underground for a long time. Hurry up and shout." Wang Ming. Chapter 742. Jia Yin had appeared just in time. As a qualified bodyguard and a peeping Tom, Wang Ming was already used to Jia Yin's stalking behavior. He just needed to remember that wherever he was, Jia Yin would definitely be there. Jia Yin's appearance also caused Ghosthead Blade to be overjoyed. He now had another option. It was very clear that as someone from the magnificent Immortal Special Combat Brigade, Jia Yin's physical strength and attributes were far superior to Wang Ming's. This was an excellent host body that was hard to come by, and was even several times better than his previous lowly host. Ghosthead Blade was secretly delighted. If he could obtain this body and then snatch Wang Ming's brain, he would be invincible. Double host, it wasn't impossible, it was just that Ghosthead Blade hadn't been able to find an opportunity before. After snatching this Jia Yin's body, he would snatch the brain, and finally merge the two into a host body. This bold idea suddenly occurred to Ghosthead Blade. This was Jia Yin's first time seeing Ghosthead Blade's original body, but she was already more than familiar with his name. Back when she had still been in the magnificent Immortal Special Combat Brigade, Jia Yin had once been assigned a mission to hunt down Ghosthead Blade. Unfortunately, the mission had failed back then. Ghosthead Blade had been too cunning, and in the end, he had still managed to escape alive despite being surrounded by so many people. Several years ago, in the failed operation codenamed Project Ghost Hunt, one of the people in the magnificent Immortal Special Combat Brigade had died in the line of duty in pursuit of Ghosthead Blade. This had become an unsolved case that year, and until now, there had been no reasonable explanation for it. But when Jia Yin had been hiding underground, she had heard Ghosthead Blade's original body's account, and thoroughly understood the whole story back then. Back then, Ghosthead Blade had probably abandoned his previous host and forcibly formed a contract with that colleague who had died in the line of duty, and in the end, escaped undetected. The space inside the military tent was truly limited. Previously, Jia Yin had tried to break through the barriers set up by the Ghosthead Blade underground, but to her surprise, she had failed. Given how weak Ghosthead Blade's current body was, it shouldn't have been possible for him to set up such a powerful barrier. Hence, Jia Yin had been particularly cautious in her head-on confrontation with Ghosthead Blade in this battle. She was certain that this Ghosthead Blade definitely had a trump card that he hadn't used yet. In the blink of an eye, the Ghosthead Blade attacked again. His target was already Wang Ming, and Ghosthead Blade was sure that in order to protect Wang Ming, this female Special Forces soldier in front of him would definitely be at a disadvantage. Dang! There was a crisp sound of metal colliding. Jia Yin swiftly unsheathed a tactical military knife from her boots and sparred with Ghosthead Blade. For a moment, Ghosthead Blade launched a relentless attack, and Jia Yin used the tactical military knife to block it with all her might. Her arms, which she brandished rapidly, turned into a series of afterimages in front of Wang Ming's eyes, like countless flailing tentacles. "You're from Magnificent Immortal, right? It's been a long time since I've seen this blade technique." Ghosthead Blade chuckled as he attacked. Because it was just a small, pitch-black blade, no matter how Jia Yin slashed at it, the Ghosthead Blade did not feel any pain. After all, he was now a fragment of an ancient saber. Even if it was just a fragment, it was too naive to think that a mere tactical saber could deal with him. The incident back then, it was indeed you, Jia Yin frowned. She was well aware that the tactical military knife had a limited effect on Ghosthead Blade. Continuing to drag things out definitely wasn't the way to go. In this kind of battle, physical exhaustion was a big taboo. In this form, Ghosthead Blade could ignore the problem of physical exhaustion and injury, but it was different for them. Furthermore, she now had to use a clone to protect Wang Ming. For a moment, Jia Yin felt the greatest pressure. But it was her duty to protect Wang Ming. Even if she had to put her life on the line, Vanguard Blade. At that moment, Jia Yin's eyes darkened. She bit her finger hard and smeared blood on the tactical military knife in her hand. The next moment, she tossed the tactical military knife up, and it actually transformed into a blade array in the air, splitting into countless shadows that enveloped her and Wang Ming. In this way, Ghosthead Blade's plan to target Wang Ming had already been mostly dispelled. However, the duration of this saber array would not be too long. Before the blade array ended, Zhai Yin had to think of a countermeasure to kill Ghosthead Blade in one blow. Special circumstances required special treatment. Zhai Yin already couldn't care less about capturing Ghosthead Blade alive, especially now that Wang Ming was in danger. All she had to do was directly execute the criminal on the spot. But contrary to Zhai Yin and Wang Ming's expectations, when Ghosthead Blade saw Zhai Yin's blade array light up, he actually stopped his frenzied and fierce attack. Looks like it's about time. Ghosthead Blade smiled faintly. Zhai Yin glared at him. What do you mean by this? As soon as she said this, Ghosthead Blade's body glowed with spirit light. In an instant, a dark purple multi-edged crystal appeared in the air. Zhai Yin's eyes instantly widened. Wang Ming didn't say anything, but he already knew the origin of this polygonal crystal. This was currently the latest technology developed at home and abroad, but which had yet to be made available to the public, magic crystal technology. The magic crystal technique was a new technique that was based on talismans. It could seal designated high-level spells in crystals made of special materials. Sealed within the magic crystal in Ghosthead Blade's hand was a level 7 spell. Ghosthead Blade sneered. Lord Night Ghost Spirit Emperor already anticipated that this trip would be risky, so he formulated a risky plan. Even the commander of the master plan, President Dylan, doesn't know about this and is completely in the dark. Lord Night Ghost Spirit Emperor is only communicating with me. Zhai Yin, what on earth do you want to do? In the fake remains, that bunch of good-for-nothings sacrificed their cells to summon an army of cells. What do you think will happen if I move that army into the remains? Zhai Yin's expression was extremely unsightly. She knew about the army of cells in the fake remains. If they were all summoned here, it would definitely be chaos. All the students would be in danger. Holding the magic crystal, Ghosthead Blade laughed heartily. Let me tell you one more thing. This magic crystal is a twin magic crystal independently developed by Night Chief. It uses a spatial array for transmission. Have you heard of the Sea and Sky Array? Sea and Sky Array. Zhai Yin frowned and looked at Wang Ming. Wang Ming, I don't know either. I only know the Sea and Sky Feast. Zhai Yin, Lord Ghosthead Blade, they're already preparing to launch the Heavenly East satellite to purge the cells. At that moment, Lord Dark Fragrance's voice came from the dark purple magic crystal. Ghosthead Blade, what a pity, it's already too late. As soon as he said that, Ghosthead Blade directly crushed the magic crystal on the spot. In a split second, dense array patterns and talisman characters spread out like a spiderweb from Wang Ming's military tent. The Sea and Sky Array was also known as the 100-li Sea and Sky Array. It could instantly transmit everything within 100 li. Chapter 743. For a moment, the ground shook incessantly. All the students thought there was a major earthquake, and they ran out of the military tent to check on the situation. The complex array patterns and talisman characters on the ground spread out like vipers, startling many of the students who scuttled up trees like monkeys. Teacher, what is this? A lead teacher was directing order. Don't panic, everyone. These are the array patterns and talisman characters of an array. They look scary, but they're harmless to the body. On the other side, Wu Zhenjuan, who had been in charge of the preliminary interrogation of President Dylan and the others, as well as dozens of teachers who had been involved in the operation plan, came out of the military tent one after another. All of them had very ugly expressions on their faces. Who would have thought that something like this would still happen in the end? Wu Zhenjuan crouched down and carefully analyzed the array patterns and talisman characters under his feet. Senior Immortal, what kind of array is this? A lead teacher asked. This is the Sea and Sky Array, also known as the 100Li Sea and Sky Array. It's the highest grade 7 transmission array. Wu Zhenjuan frowned. Generally speaking, to set up this kind of array, you need to set it up at least half a month in advance within a radius of 100 li, and then link it up in a line. But the remains have only just opened, so it's clearly impossible to set it up in advance, so this 100 li Sea and Sky Array is an instant one. Many of the lead teachers were enlightened. As the chief commander of the teachers appointed by Huaxiao Alliance this time, it could only be said that Wu Zhenjuan was in the end Wu Zhenjuan. In just a few words, he had completely analyzed the current situation. Furthermore, Wu Zhenjuan could already tell that the person who had summoned the array definitely had the rumored magic crystal. This was a new type of technology that had yet to be clearly announced in various countries. It could seal high-level spells in crystals, and when necessary, they could be crushed to instantly cast spells. On the side, Wang Ling also followed a group of students up the tree. Although he wasn't afraid of the magic array under his feet, he still chose to go with the flow. This was the reaction a normal foundation establishment student should have, otherwise it would definitely look very strange. The truth was that he had been observing the movements in the military tent the whole time. The moment Ghost Head Blade took out the magic crystal, Wang Ling had already guessed that something bad was going to happen. Of all the dark forces they had come into contact with so far, it could only be said that Night Chief was indeed the greatest threat. That was because Night Chief was a foreign power to begin with. Even Huaxiao Nation's officials were unable to directly root out this organization. Even if this group of members was overthrown at home, as long as their overseas headquarters still existed, Night Chief would still be able to get away with it. Thus, it would be best if this incident could attract the attention of the International Cultivation Police Department. Now that Night Chief was planning to make a move on the students, this was the best reason to report it to the International Cultivation Police Department. But Wang Ling didn't plan to make a move, because there were enough teachers present to ensure the students' safety. These teachers were all top-notch experts. Moreover, among this group of experts, there was an important figure hidden behind them. Wang Ling's gaze fell indifferently on a middle-aged man not far away. He knew. This lord was about to make his move. At the same time, Huaxiao Alliance's headquarters was also alarmed by this situation. 100 secrets and one careless mistake. President Chi put both hands on the table, leaving a deep palm print on it. He could no longer maintain his composure at the scene in front of him. He actually possesses a magic crystal? The other 10 great generals, who were standing beside them, were shocked as well. It would not be an exaggeration to say that Ghost Head Blade bringing out this magic crystal was something that no one had anticipated. President Chi made an emergency response. The moment he discovered that the Sea and Sky Array had been activated, he immediately ordered General Bai to join forces with the Songhai Mahjong Squad and Huaxiao Alliance cultivators to set up a protective barrier. On the other side, he would remotely mobilize the Heavenly E satellite to launch a Heavenly E bomb in space to wipe out the summoned Cell army in one go. The Heavenly E bomb was extremely powerful, but General Bai was on the fake remains. As long as the barrier was set up, casualties and losses in the fake remains could be minimized. Even if Huaxiao Alliance cultivators were affected by the Heavenly E bomb, it would at least be a lot better than if the students were hurt. There was nothing he could do about it. How long until the Heavenly E satellite is activated? President Chi asked anxiously, his cheeks already drenched in cold sweat. Lord President, the Heavenly E satellite is still in the charging stage, and will need another 5 minutes. But the Sea and Sky Array will be activated smoothly in another minute. A technician said. So fast. General E was astonished. President Chi frowned deeply. The spells sealed in the magic crystal are all built-in spells that have already been set up. Whenever they're used, they're cast instantly. It looks like it's already too late. Lord President, what should we do now? The technician asked. 1. Immediately inform the Special Operations Team led by Audiobook to cooperate with the lead teachers to evacuate the students. 2. Request His Excellency the Head of State to make a move. It would be best if he could destroy this sea and sky array and interrupt the transmission. President Xi said resolutely. But this would be extremely difficult. The sea and sky array was the most powerful level 7 spell array, and also the most difficult to destroy. Because it covered such a huge area, finding the core array pattern was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Even the head of state might not be able to find it. But now, it seemed that there was no other way. Audiobook soon received news from President Xi. Because most of the troops were stationed deep in the forest, they had been searching for them for a long time. Now that they were almost there, they hadn't expected a new unforeseen event. Now, the whole forest was like a bouncing trampoline as every inch of the ground shook. Fatty Luo jumped up and down along with the vibrations. The dark sect this time is probably richer than Immortal Mansion. They've even revealed their undisclosed technology first. Don't tell me they have their own research team behind them. This is a rebellion. Audiobook sighed. This was a classic case of not being afraid of fighting with hooligans, but afraid of hooligans being cultured. Watching Fatty Luo jump around, Little Silver felt a little bad in his heart. Mr. Luo, please stop jumping. Are you dancing on shit? Fatty Luo, Audiobook. Now isn't the time to joke around. We have to think of a way to protect the children first. What's the plan? Fatty Luo asked. Audiobook cupped his chin in his hand and thought for a bit, then he gazed at the bandaged girl next to him. Wuji, can you move the entire array? Wuji shook her head. Do you want me to die of exhaustion? It's very tiring to move such a large array. No way, no way. At that moment, Audiobook took out a ring and smiled at Wuji. Wuji, I advise you to be kind. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal gave me 5 of the 10 flames of purification previously. Could he still give this thing away? Wuji's face instantly changed. Yes, Master, I'll go right away. Chapter 744. This was an instantaneous sea and sky array, and it was almost impossible to stop it midway. There were only 2 solutions in this situation. 1. Find the core array pattern and destroy the foundation of the great array so that it couldn't be stabilized and thus disintegrated. Otherwise, as long as the cell summoning array on the fake remains existed, the summoned cells would be continuously transmitted over. But the sea and sky array was too huge, and the array pattern was extremely complicated. It was almost impossible to find the core array pattern in a short period of time. The second solution was to find a way to move the sea and sky array elsewhere, and then use a large-scale spell to directly destroy it. This seemed to be the most feasible method at the moment. However, it would cause serious damage to the real remains itself. On the fake remains side, Lord Dark Fragrance, who had used the cells at work spell to summon cells, looked at the dozen or so Night Chief members who had already completely withered. Back then, Lord Dark Fragrance had suggested using cells to summon cells to save his life, but this move was extremely harmful to the body, and wasn't just as simple as shortening one's lifespan. The reason why it was said to shorten one's lifespan was completely a stopgap measure. In normal circumstances, summoning 1 or 2 cells to do battle would indeed consume some lifespan, which wasn't a big deal. But for such a large number of white blood cells and red blood cell armies, the problem wasn't as simple as burning lifespan. Under such a powerful summoning spell, all the cells of a person would ultimately be sacrificed, and all the organs in the body would be consumed. Every drop of vital essence in the body would be completely burned away. As the master of the array, Dark Fragrance could naturally control the array to protect himself and be safe. He and Ghost Head Blade had already received a secret order from Night Ghost Spirit Emperor to use this special method in a special situation. This move was very much like throwing caution to the wind, but it also posed a huge problem for Huaxiao Alliance. Because destroying the sea and sky array would damage the real remains no matter what. In the last few years, Huaxiao Nation had been relying on their words to protect Beast King's remains to firmly control the entrance to Devil Valley's secret land. If this sea and sky array was handled improperly now, as long as it caused some international public opinion, other countries would definitely take advantage of the situation and apply to the International United Cultivators Association to jointly manage Devil Valley. That would truly be the point where it would be hard to get off. At this moment, within the range of the sea and sky array in the forest, a large expanse of thick fog rose. This was a sign that the array formation had been activated. Many of the leading teachers began to organize the students to retreat into the rainbow glass box. This was the most important thing to do now. As long as the students retreated, the teachers could fight on their own without having to worry about the consequences. These summoned cells were huge in size, and every single one of them was extremely strong. Even the weakest one was at the gold core stage. Even if the Foundation Establishment stage students joined forces, they would only be sending themselves to their deaths. The head of state stood in the void and looked down at the sea and sky array beneath his feet. This array covered 1/7 of the dense forest in the east. 1/7 of the forest sounded like a small portion, but there were still many extinct resources within. The portion that was open to the students today was just the tip of the iceberg in this dense forest. A small piece of land that was not even 1/7 of the total territory. Destroying the core array pattern was the best way to prevent the remains from being destroyed as much as possible. But this sea and sky array had clearly been specially processed. An array expert could make a big deal out of the structure of the array pattern and set up many fake array patterns to conceal the true core. Furthermore, these fake array patterns were no less complex than the real ones. It was like the fake wires in a bomb. The slightest mistake could set off a chain reaction. Unless they were all destroyed in one go, even the head of state wouldn't dare act rashly. He could see that there was something fishy about these fake array patterns. If he destroyed one by mistake, the fake array patterns would rapidly multiply and spread. Seeing that the students in the forest had been safely pulled back into the rainbow glass box, the head of state heaved a sigh of relief. It was likely that the military tents below would all go to waste this time. The children had been evacuated in such a hurry that there was no time at all to retrieve the tents. Is there any way to lock onto the core? The Huaxiao Alliance Command Center received the head of state's question. President Qi sighed. For the time being, there was nothing he could do. If he had been at the scene, he might have been able to use the brain deduction technique to find the true core array pattern. Because everything in the deduction technique was an illusion of the brain, it wouldn't have the slightest effect even if he destroyed the wrong array pattern. But now, unless he could use the heavenly eye to correctly identify the array pattern, all his hopes now rested on Wang Ming alone. As President Qi's disciple, Wang Ming naturally knew the pros and cons of this matter. They had to find the core array pattern in order to minimize the damage to the remains. In the military tent, Zhai Yin, who had activated Vanguard Blade, was evenly matched with Ghost Head Blade. This was a very difficult opponent. Although Wang Ming had lived with Zhai Yin for less than half a year, their tacit understanding had unknowingly risen to a new level because they had been together day and night. Now wasn't the time for Wang Ming to be trapped in the tent, otherwise his brain deduction technique wouldn't be able to cover the entire sea and sky array at all. After noticing Wang Ming's meaningful glance, Zhai Yin changed his line of attack and deliberately revealed some flaws. Ghost Head Blade's killing intent burst forth as he did his best to kill Zhai Yin first. In the next moment, Ghost Head Blade, which had turned into a small pitch-black blade, smashed heavily into the barrier which he had set up, and it instantly cracked. Zhai Yin borrowed the force of the attack to break the barrier in one go. Success! Zhai Yin cried out excitedly. She stayed by Wang Ming's side and continued to stand guard for him. Almost the instant the barrier was broken, Wang Ming had already sat down cross-legged. He activated the brain deduction technique to the maximum and summoned the heavenly materials sword in an attempt to find the specific location of the core array pattern. At that moment, the army of white blood cells and red blood cells which had been transmitted from the fake remains had already sprung up from the ground like bamboo shoots after a rain. This was undoubtedly a huge obstacle to Wang Ming's search for the core array pattern. There are actually so many of them, many of the teachers who had stayed behind marveled one after another. The students no longer had anything to worry about. Under Wu Zhenjuan's command, they all stayed behind to stand guard for Wang Ming. Once Wang Ming found the core array pattern, they would gather all their firepower to destroy it in one go. However, the number of white blood cells, red blood cells and even macrophages made everyone feel like they were in a sea of people. The number of these summoned cells was too huge. There were actually more than 10,000 of them. Most of the cells didn't have high realms, but because there were so many of them, it was extremely troublesome to deal with them. That Lord Dark fragrance from the fake remains had already been transmitted over through the sea and sky array to meet up with Ghosthead Blade. Brother Dark fragrance is really skilled. Ghosthead Blade looked at the vast army and praised him from the bottom of his heart. Just a small trick, Dark fragrance replied. The two of them stood in the distance and watched from a distance. They didn't notice Wang Ling's clone standing not too far away from them, staring at the army of cells with dead fish eyes. Just as all the teachers were discussing telepathically how to split up to face the enemy, in the next moment, something that no one could have imagined happened. The cells which had just emerged actually shrank back. Chapter 745. A tremendous oppressive force descended from the sky and swept over the scene, making it impossible to tell what on earth was going on. Who was it? For a moment, all the teachers leading the team, including Princeps, who was about to attack, were deeply shocked. They could feel that there was a powerful master releasing his domineering aura at an extremely close distance from them. And the most terrifying thing was that this domineering aura actually caused the group of summoned activated cells to shrink back one by one. It could be said that these cells already had a very strong desire to live. Ghosthead Blade and Lord Dark Fragrance also had shocked expressions on their faces. The greatest expert they had locked onto was undoubtedly that lord who had disguised himself as head of State 001. But this spiritual pressure clearly wasn't released by him. At the scene, there was a hidden expert who was out of everyone's expectations. In Huaxiao Alliance's headquarters, the 10 generals present couldn't help getting up one by one as they stared in shock at the scene in front of them. After this spiritual pressure of unknown origin descended, President Qi asked the technicians to immediately activate all the gauges to monitor the data. In the end, all 120 spiritual pressure gauges in all of Huaxiao Alliance were filled to the brim. The needle was directly pushed to its highest peak. Furthermore, more than 10 spiritual pressure gauges couldn't withstand the pressure and exploded in less than a few seconds after they were filled to the brim. President Qi's face turned pale with shock. These spiritual pressure gauges were connected to space satellites and had very strong negative pressure. Furthermore, they were connected in series. Even if the head of state got angry, he could only fill 60 or so gauges at most. But now, not only were these 120 gauges all filled to the brim, more than 10 had exploded. Old Qi, this isn't the first time, right? Dressed in his exercise clothes, General Yi floated in the air and pinched his mustache as he looked solemnly at the scene in front of him. Next to him, the other 10 generals, including Marshal Jiang, also had puzzled expressions on their faces. Everyone's hearts were as clear as a mirror. Because this wasn't the first time this had happened. The most recent time, during the joint military training exercise for the 6 schools back then, there had been a situation where all the spiritual pressure gauges had been filled to the brim and then exploded. At that time, President Qi had been the one directing it from behind the scenes. Everyone had thought that the gauges had malfunctioned, so they hadn't paid too much attention to it. However, after the maintenance, the technicians in charge of maintenance said that there were no problems with the instrument, and that it was a normal phenomenon caused by the overload of spiritual pressure. At that time, this had become an unsolved case with many suspicious points. This was because General E was the only one of the 10 generals who had been sent to participate in the joint military training exercise for the 6 schools, and his limit was 40 spans. The old devil, who had yet to reach his prime, was about 20 years old. Therefore, even if the 2 of them were fighting at that time, it was impossible for all the spiritual pressure gauges to be filled up. As expected, has that mysterious expert shown up again? President Chi frowned deeply. Including the time during the military training for the 6 schools, this should already be the 3rd time this had happened. The earliest time was when the gate between worlds had descended 6 years ago, around the time that the sky-swallowing toad had been defeated, and there had been a peak in spiritual pressure. The whole of Huaxiao Alliance took the mysterious expert's attacks very seriously. But to everyone's surprise this time, including President Chi's, no one had expected this mysterious expert to actually be among the summer camp's lineups. This person has attacked us again and again in secret, so he probably isn't willing to show his face. But this just happens to expose his identity. General E said. After the summer camp is over, you can make a list of all the teachers involved in this operation, and we'll investigate them one by one. General Yi's first instinct was that this mysterious expert was among the teachers. Because all the students had already been withdrawn into the rainbow glass box at the scene, the teachers leading the team were undoubtedly the most suspicious. President Chi nodded. Looking at the current situation, this person has attacked us again and again, so he should be a friend and not a foe. But he's hiding in the dark and we can't control him. That's absolutely out of the question. There were still a few days left in the summer camp. Since it had already been proven that this mysterious expert was among them, this was undoubtedly the best time to ferret him out. Because the head of state was with them this time, if the head of state was allowed to test the waters, no matter how powerful that expert was, he would definitely give himself away. It was just that they would never have thought. The mysterious expert, who could cause more than 120 spiritual pressure gauges to be filled up, was just one of Wang Ling's clones. Wang Ling had promised the Heavenly Tao that he wouldn't take the initiative to make a move, but after seeing the sea and sky array, he had second thoughts. Right now, he probably wasn't taking the initiative to make a move, he had been forced to defend himself. Besides, he was really keeping a low profile this time. He had just had his clone force the summoned cell army back, which shouldn't be too excessive. On the other side, under the protection of Zhai Yin and the many teachers, Wang Ming's brain worked at lightning speed as he used the brain deduction technique to search for the core array pattern. Sitting cross-legged on the ground, his whole body flushed red because his brain was working at high speed. Blue veins popped out on his forehead as they pulsed, which was a ghastly sight to behold. Zhai Yin even wondered if Wang Ming's head would instantly burst like a balloon filled with air at the slightest touch. Since the cells summoned by Ghost Head Blade had been scared back by Wang Ling's clone, the pressure on the teachers leading the team was a lot less. They kept a close eye on Ghost Head Blade and Dark Fragrance, who weren't far away. Dark Fragrance was remotely controlling the summoning array, and had activated the death-defying mode, intending to make a comeback. Just at that moment, Wang Ming opened his eyes. Found it. Seeing this, the head of state immediately pointed through the air and synchronized Wang Ming's memories with the minds of all the teachers leading the team. Everyone, attack. Gather all your firepower. Smash the core array pattern. In an instant, more than 10 teachers rushed out. Following the coordinates in Wang Ming's mind, they successfully found the location of the core array pattern. Boom 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 boom, endless light cannons and light waves shot out from the teachers' palms and magic weapons as they fired wildly at the core array pattern, sparing no effort. Want to destroy the array pattern? It won't be that easy. Ghost Head Blade was furious. Wang Ming had been completely surrounded by the iron bucket array just now, and Ghost Head Blade hadn't been able to find a chance to attack him at all. Now that most of the people had been sent out to attack the core array pattern, Ghost Head Blade knew his chance had come. He manipulated the pitch-black blade that he had transformed into to directly burrow into the ground, intending to launch a surprise attack from underground. Chapter 746. It was only in that moment that Ghost Head Blade realized that the soil in the real remains wasn't ordinary soil. He had directly touched it with his metal body, and his body had almost been corroded. Fortunately, he had reacted quickly, otherwise he would have been seriously injured if he had been underground for a few more seconds. After learning that the soil was corrosive, Ghost Head Blade immediately changed his mind and tried to launch another attack on Wang Ming. Wang Ming was now in a very dangerous situation. Because he had used up too much energy using the brain deduction technique earlier, he was now in a weak state. This state was a little like anemia, where his qi and blood were weak due to insufficient blood supply to his brain. He was sweating all over and his heart was racing. It was like a person who had suddenly stopped running at full speed, and Wang Ming felt uncomfortable all over. He was doing his best to adjust his breathing and control his heart rate. In this situation, a normal qi replenishing elixir wouldn't have much of an effect on him, because this was an injury caused by his mental strength. Brother Dark Fragrance, cover me. At that moment, Night Chief's forces had completely collapsed, and the only people who could salvage the situation were Ghost Head Blade and this Lord Dark Fragrance. Both of them were extremely difficult to deal with among Dark Network members. Sensing the killing intent, Zhai Yin immediately set up an army knife formation next to Wang Ming. Cell Proliferation Spell. Lord Dark Fragrance's hands formed a seal, and a white cyst-like substance immediately emerged on Ghost Head Saber's pitch-black blade. These cyst-like substances rapidly multiplied on Ghost Head Saber's body like bacteria, continuously replicating themselves, unexpectedly forming an extremely tough and resilient cell armor that could continuously regenerate. Ghost Head Blade didn't need to worry about anything else at all, he just needed to charge forward. His target was Wang Ming. The head of state's heart sank at this scene. He stretched out his hand to block the attack, but in the next moment, Lord Dark Fragrance, who had used the cell proliferation spell, suddenly raised his hand and shot out a purple wave of light. Was this a moving light wave? The head of state stared at Lord Dark Fragrance, whose eyes were fluctuating. His aura increased dramatically and was already completely different from before. The head of state stopped, but didn't gradually focus. Who goes there? Huaxiao Alliance headquarters. President Qi was also deep in thought at this scene as he thought of a high-level spell called the Cell Assimilation Spell. This was a kind of possession spell similar to a spirit ghost. As long as you obtained DNA beforehand, you could use this spell to possess a body from a distance. Most possession spells had a range, and the two bodies couldn't be too far apart, but the cell assimilation spell could ignore this limitation. However, there was a time limit. Under normal circumstances, the cell assimilation technique could only last 5 minutes at most when it was used to possess someone. This Lord Dark Fragrance was originally a biological scientist, and his research on cells was extremely thorough. He could even skillfully master a spell like the Cells at Work spell, so casting the cell assimilation spell couldn't be any easier. Who possessed this person? General Yi asked. President Qi sighed and said in a deep voice, looking at the current situation, the only one who can confront His Excellency the head of state head-on, is the leader behind Night Chief. Now, President Qi finally realized something. So all of this had been premeditated by Night Chief. From the sea and sky array to Night Ghost Spirit Emperor personally taking action, everything had been part of Night Chief's plan. Through Dark Fragrance's cell assimilation spell, Night Ghost Spirit Emperor had successfully possessed Night Ghost Spirit Emperor. This was a memorable scene for Night Ghost Spirit Emperor because it was his first head-on confrontation with the head of state of Huaxiao Nation. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor stared at the head of state and sneered. Your Excellency's smokescreen is pretty good. That humanoid magic treasure was just a step away from deceiving me and crossing the sea. There was no need for superfluous movements at all in a showdown between experts. The two of them faced each other from a distance and didn't look like they were doing anything, but they were in fact competing in secret. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor's intention was very clear. He knew that the time he could possess Wang Ming was limited, so he was deliberately stalling for time. In this situation, the head of state couldn't spare any extra effort to save Wang Ming, and could only rely on Jia Yin and the other lead teachers to ensure Wang Ming's safety. Get out of the way. The head of state stared at Night Ghost Spirit Emperor with a profound look in his eyes, and his body released a frightening pressure. Your Excellency can step over this venerable one first, and this venerable one will naturally step aside. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor laughed. He was completely unafraid. Both of them were true immortals, and judging from the initial clash of auras, the head of state was sure that this Night Ghost Spirit Emperor's strength was on par with his own. If they fought in the real remains, it would definitely be harmful, not beneficial. What was more, this was the first time Night Ghost Spirit Emperor was fighting an enemy while possessing him. Exposing too much definitely wasn't a good thing. What a pity. At that moment, Night Ghost Spirit Emperor suddenly sighed. What a pity that the humanoid magic treasure Your Excellency sent had such good defense, and self-destructed before we could analyze it. Otherwise, this venerable one would have studied it carefully, and then called a deity spirit car to send it back. In any case, it's just an old man robot that doesn't look very beautiful. No matter how beastly some deity spirit car drivers are, they probably won't go so far as to lay their hands on an old man. Hearing this, the head of state's face darkened. He did his best to maintain his composure. He knew that the other party was trying to goad him into making a move. For a moment, the confrontation between the two great experts was in a deadlock. Elsewhere, Ghost Head Blade advanced unimpeded under the cover of Night Ghost Spirit Emperor and Dark Fragrance's cell proliferation spell. For a moment, Jia Yin was under immense pressure. The lead teachers who had been left behind weren't as strong as her, and they lacked combat experience, so they had no idea what to do in the face of these menacing criminals. After receiving Wang Ming's coordinates, most of the teachers attacked the core array pattern. As long as the sea and sky array didn't disappear for even a moment, the real remains would be in danger of being destroyed. Space slash. Ghost Head Blade dashed forward as fast as a beam of light. The moment he got close, Jia Yin's expression abruptly changed. It was actually a space slash. This was a purely suicidal saber technique. Jia Yin never thought that Ghost Head Blade, who had been clamoring for a host earlier, would actually use such a suicidal blade technique in the blink of an eye. Go to hell. Ghost Head Blade let out a low sneer, and the blade cut through the cracks in the air as it directly pierced through Jia Yin's body. But contrary to Ghost Head Blade's expectations, it seemed that Jia Yin hadn't been hit. Her body appeared on the other side. Jia Yin had been saved by Wang Ming's brain deduction technique. Ghost Head Blade was flustered and exasperated, but he didn't stop attacking. Just as he was about to attack Wang Ming, the latter suddenly clutched his head and let out a pained roar. The next moment, a black hole rose from the top of Wang Ming's head. Chapter 747. August 1st, Tuesday in the 15th week of the semester. Wang Ming had disappeared on his birthday. To be exact, the exact time of his disappearance should have been a little earlier. The summer camp activities had to be temporarily suspended. Right now, the most important task was to send someone to search for Wang Ming. Of course, the students didn't know about Wang Ming's disappearance. Most of them had been in the glass box when it happened, and had no idea what was going on in the outside world. As the chief commander of the teachers, Wu Xinjuan's explanation for the temporary suspension of the summer camp was that a group of foreign rebels had been caught yesterday, and they needed to assign some people to conduct a preliminary interrogation. After the interrogation was over, the summer camp would resume as usual. Apart from Wang Ling and Fang Xing, no one else in the line of students knew the truth. The only good news was that the sea and sky array had been dispelled, and Lord Dark Fragrance, who was responsible for the cell summoning, had also been taken down by the head of state after the effects of the cell assimilation spell ended. After that, Audjua's special operations team arrived and entered the rainbow glass box to attend the meeting with Wuzhenjuan. Jai-in was supposed to be at the meeting, but because of the battle and her deep self-blame, the moment Wang Ming was sucked into the black hole, she had collapsed. The medical team had no choice but to give her a strong sedative and force her to rest. In the conference room inside the rainbow glass box, Audjua took Little Silver and Fatty Luo with him, while Wuji transformed into her original form and was stored in Audjua's storage space. Right now, Limitless Sword God's identity could not be revealed, or else it would attract unnecessary trouble. Wuzhenjuan, let me introduce these two people to Mr. Luo Chuang and Mr. Silver, the Special Operations Team's right-hand men this time. I met them on the Cultivation Forum, and they're very good friends with me and Great Death Courting Senior. Audjua introduced Fatty Luo and Little Silver. Wuzhenjuan nodded. Fatty Luo and Little Silver had to have been specially vetted by the authorities to be able to enter the remains as part of the Special Operations Team, so Wuzhenjuan hadn't asked too much about their identities. In fact, as soon as he heard that they were friends of that Great Death Courting Senior, Wuzhenjuan knew that there was basically nothing wrong with them. Great Death Courting Senior was a famous person in the circle. His realm was not high, but his ability to court death was strong. All these years, not only had he been fighting evil forces everywhere, he had also been busy doing charity work. Although Wuzhenjuan hadn't had any special contact with Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal, he had heard about him through various grapevines. To sum it up in one sentence, not only did this person like to court death, his family also had a mine. Clearing his throat, Wuzhenjuan said, "Next, I'll explain to Director Zhuo what's happening now." This was a secret meeting for Audjua's Special Operations Team, and Wuzhenjuan and Audjua's team were the only ones in the huge conference room. Wuzhenjuan, thanks to Teacher Wang, the sea and sky array has already been broken. However, a small number of activated white blood cells, red blood cells, and macrophages are still roaming around the ruins. We've already sent some teachers to track them down. The Dark Network fugitive, codenamed Dark Fragrance, gave these cells a new order before he was arrested, asking them to destroy the spirit plants. This was already a broken pot that had been smashed. Can't we destroy the summoning array? Audjua sighed. Wuzhenjuan shook his head. Although the summoning array in the fake remains was destroyed through the sea and sky array's transmission, the activated cells that were teleported to the real remains weren't affected by the array's range. I see. Audjua nodded. Wuzhenjuan, the second thing I want to talk about is that Teacher Wang and Ghosthead Blade were sucked into the black hole during the operation this time. According to President Qi of Huaxiao Alliance, this black hole wasn't a space fissure formed by the space slash, but a special side effect of Teacher Wang's brain deduction technique when it was overloaded. Audjua, Little Silver and Fatty Luo were blank when they heard this, and didn't quite understand what he meant. Wuzhenjuan thought for a bit, then gave a simpler explanation. Actually, to put it simply, Director Zhuo can understand it as Teacher Wang's mental fluctuations affecting the real world because his brain was overworking, thus creating the legendary brain hole. That black hole is actually a brain hole. Audjua was silent for a long time. After a while, he looked up at Wuzhenjuan. What are Teacher Wang's chances of survival? He wanted to hear Huaxiao Nation's official data on Wang Ming's chances of survival. Actually, Audjua knew that there was a high chance that Wang Ming wouldn't die at all. After all, he was a man backed by Shifu. Furthermore, when Audjua had seen Shifu's relaxed expression during the meeting, his heart had instantly become as clear as a mirror. He speculated that Shifu had most likely given Wang Ming a resurrection token. Wuzhenjuan's face darkened at Audjua's words. After a while, he looked up at Audjua. A brain hole is also a special form of a spatial storm. If a cultivator falls into one and isn't prepared, their chances of survival are less than 30%, unless they're almighties at or above itinerant immortal level, whose physical qualities allow them to travel through the spatial storm. Given that Teacher Wang is immortal, his chances of survival are very low. After saying that, Wu Zhenjuan raised his little finger. This is Teacher Wang's current chances of survival, odd zhua, 1%. Wu Zhenjuan, 1 in 10,000, odd zhua. By the time the meeting ended, it was already the wee hours of August 1st. 2/3 of the teachers in the rainbow glass box had been sent out to look for Wang Ming, even if many of them knew in their hearts that his chances of survival were very slim, and there was probably no one here who was more familiar with the spatial storm than Wu Ji. It was true that a spatial storm was very scary. If it was just a mortal body, it would be torn to shreds in an instant once it was sucked in. But Wu Ji had another opinion. A brain hole isn't the only thing that can lead to a spatial storm, it's just that there's a higher probability of it forming, Wu Ji said. There's another situation, and that's spatial turbulence. If it's in a spatial turbulence, Mr. Wang's chances of survival will be much higher. Space turbulence was a spatial anomaly with a very low probability of occurring. People who were swallowed by it would drift in space for a very long time, and in the end would be spat back into their original world. Of course, the position in which they would be spat out would definitely change. It was random. Chapter 748. Wang Ming woke up. The first thing he felt was sharp pain, as if his head had been cut open with a watermelon knife. This feeling lasted for a very long time before Wang Ming recovered a little. Even when he moved, he didn't dare make too big of a movement for fear of hurting his head. By the time he sat up straight to figure out where on earth he was, it had already been 2 hours since he had opened his eyes. Tormented by the headache, he was covered in sweat when he sat up, and the white coat he was wearing was already soaked through. Now, he could finally see his surroundings clearly. He was in the middle of an aurora. The scene in front of him was a sea of glass with no end in sight. The sky was full of bright purple and red auroras, which intertwined and dazzled the eyes. And now, he was sitting on the bamboo raft that the heavenly material sword had turned into, drifting in the sea of glass. Is this what old Qi meant by the brain hole? After calming his thoughts, Wang Ming thought about why he was here. He remembered very clearly that he had forcibly used the brain deduction technique to save Zhai Yin while his brain was overloaded, which was why he had ended up like this. If it hadn't been for the heavenly material sword, he would have already been torn to shreds by the storm the moment he had been sucked into the space. High-end magic swords all had a save the master spirit blade mechanism, and the activation of this mechanism usually depended on the sword spirit. The better the rapport between the sword and its master, the more likely the sword spirit would come out to block the blade in a critical moment, even at the cost of its own life. But Wang Ming's heavenly material sword didn't have a sword spirit, and this save the master spirit blade mechanism was nothing more than a similar effect that Wang Ming had created using scientific methods. In any case, the heavenly material sword was a rare magic sword that Qing Yu had created at great cost. When he had redesigned the heavenly material sword back then, Wang Ming had thought that apart from adding some scientific elements to it, he would also do his best to conform to the traditional definition of a magic sword. Simply put, his scientific magic sword could do the same thing as a regular magic sword. It was just that Wang Xing never thought that this idea he had back then would actually come in handy at this moment. "Brat, you're awake?" Just as Wang Ming was pondering how to get out, Ghost Head Blade's voice rang out from the bamboo raft. Startled, Wang Ming hurriedly sat back on his haunches. After taking a closer look, he realized that Ghost Head Blade really was on the bamboo raft. The heavenly material sword savior mechanism could only be activated on its owner. Wang Ming guessed that the heavenly material sword had probably mistaken Ghost Head Blade's blade form for his magic treasure, so it had saved him as well. This could be considered a flaw in Wang Ming's design. Wang Ming grit his teeth. He hadn't expected to slip up so easily. if he could get out of here in the future, he must fix this bug. If he could get out, however, Ghosthead Blade's situation seemed to be even worse than his. Logically speaking, Ghosthead Blade would definitely kill him, but Ghosthead Blade wasn't in a hurry to act. He quietly laid in his blade form in front of the bamboo raft, not even revealing a hint of killing intent. Or perhaps, Ghosthead Blade no longer had the strength to display his killing intent. I didn't expect that in the end, I would fall into trouble with you, and get sucked into the dead sea of space. Dao's voice was very weak. Was this the dead sea of space? Wang Ming narrowed his eyes and didn't dare make any big movements. He had been so startled by Ghosthead Blade's voice that he had sat back on his haunches, but in the end, his head had almost exploded. He remembered that old Chi had taught him about the cultivation vacuum before. The dead sea of space could be considered a type of space turbulence, which was a little better than a space storm. However, when you were sucked into it, you would still suffer the pain of space being torn apart. The only difference was that the space turbulence phenomenon corresponded to the dead sea of space. This kind of environment was slightly safer, while the space storm corresponded to an even bigger storm. Unless one was an almighty cultivator, most people would not be able to return after entering. Wang Ming stretched his hand out of the bamboo raft and lightly dipped it in a drop of the dead sea of space's water. This was a type of space liquid which was extremely buoyant. It was bottomless and wouldn't be dangerous if you touched it lightly, but you absolutely couldn't immerse yourself in it for a long time. Otherwise, no matter how strong you were, the space liquid would slowly corrode you. If you were to throw the demon head blade off the bamboo raft now. Wang Ming instantly had a bold idea. But this idea was quickly interrupted by Ghosthead Blade's voice. Brat. I know what you're thinking. I'm warning you, I'm in so much pain that I can barely move right now, but if you dare make a move on me, believe it or not, I'll immediately cut your throat and take you down with me. Wang Ming withdrew his thoughts. His intuition told him that this wasn't an alarmist talk. Given Ghosthead Blade's current state, it was impossible for him to possess Wang Ming's body for the time being, but he definitely had the strength to take him down with him. The heavenly material sword had now turned into a bamboo raft to protect her, and this was the only weapon Wang Ming had left. If he still had the heavenly material sword, he might still be able to put up a fight against Ghosthead Blade, who was almost at death's door. But since he couldn't directly use the heavenly material sword, it was definitely an irrational choice to fight force with force. After all, he was just a mortal. Of course, I still have to save the last bit of strength to get out of here. If you don't have any ill intentions towards me, I naturally won't attack you. It won't do me any good. Ghosthead Blade smiled bitterly. You still want to get out of here? Wang Ming was amused. Once we're sucked into the dead sea of space, unless we can tear the space ourselves, we can only wait for the space to expel foreign objects and spit us out. What do you think are the chances of that? A lot of people misunderstood the phenomenon of space turbulence, and that was that after being sucked into it, the space would spit you out on its own in a few hours. Indeed, the dead sea of space would spit out living things in a few hours in the real world, but the flow of time inside was different from that in the real world outside. For every day spent drifting in the dead sea of space, only 10 minutes had passed in the outside world. It looks like you know a lot about the dead sea of space. Ghosthead Blade gave a sinister laugh. As you said, it's almost impossible for me to get out in my current state. But I dare to speculate that you definitely have a way to get out. Your brain can help me get out of danger, so this is one of the reasons why I chose not to kill you. Speaking up to this point, Ghosthead Blade's voice suddenly turned cold. So now, you only have two choices. 1. Perish together with me. 2. We'll work together and get out. Fine, I choose the second. Wang Ming spread his hands and didn't hesitate at all. But when you say work together, how do you mean work together? Ghosthead Blade, you think of a way out, I'll cheer you on. Chapter 749. Wang Ming wasn't a fool. Since they were going to work together to escape, Ghosthead Blade had to pay a price, otherwise it would be a huge loss for him. Although Ghosthead Blade claimed that he wanted to throw caution to the wind in the current situation, Wang Ming felt that Ghosthead Blade's chances of survival were higher. Ghosthead Blade really wanted to get out of here, but that didn't mean that Wang Ming could use this as a threat. Wang Ming remembered what Ghosthead Blade had said before. In his blade form, he had to find a host within a few days, otherwise his soul would be cursed by the ancient artifact spirit and be directly destroyed. That was to say, Wang Ming had to figure out a way to get out within 2 days at the very least. Otherwise, given Ghosthead Blade's personality, he would definitely throw caution to the wind and drag Wang Ming down with him. This game had already begun when the two of them had drifted on the bamboo raft that the heavenly material sword had turned into. Wang Ming realized that if he wanted to survive, he had to race against time. In the end, time flowed differently in the outside world, and he wasn't sure whether Wang Ling would be able to find him. He had clearly told Wang Ling before to keep a low profile as much as possible during the summer camp, in order to avoid arousing the suspicions of the many teachers this time. But Wang Ming had always been looking forward to Wang Ling's appearance. But in the end, it was just that, if possible, Wang Ming still wanted to use his own strength to break through this crisis. At any time, it was better to rely on oneself than on others. He had to survive, he still had too many unfinished business. If he died, who would listen to old Chi's nagging? He had promised old Chi that one day, he would definitely become the latter's most outstanding disciple, surpass his father, and live up to his name as the Wisdom Saint. If he died, what would happen to the research on Head of State 001? This was the work he was most proud of so far. If he died, who would eat Jai Yin's unpalatable dragon pork chop? If he died, what would happen to the research on primordial Qi? Who would save his little brother? For a moment, Wang Ming's thoughts raced. Wang Ming had always felt that he was like a flower in a greenhouse, he was always protected and airtight by others. He had never thought that one day he would be in trouble. If it wasn't for this experience, Wang Ming felt that he wouldn't have thought about these problems at all. Wang Ming, he had to do everything he could to break out of here and survive. Wang Ming pondered deeply. The look in his eyes inexplicably reassured Ghosthead Blade. This was a gamble. He hadn't chosen to kill Wang Ming, but had pinned all his hopes of survival on Wang Ming alone. As for the promise not to make a move on Wang Ming and the two of them going out together, promise? How much could it be worth? Ghosthead Blade had already made up his mind. As long as Wang Ming figured out a way to get out, he would use the last bit of his strength to possess Wang Ming's body. He didn't have much time left. In less than 4 days, his soul would be cursed, and he would perish. He had to live. Only by living could he have everything. Ghosthead Blade knew that there was no turning back now that he had come this far. He had been a knife in the hands of others for many years, accepted all kinds of missions, and even made deals with the ancient artifact spirit at all costs to become what he was today. All of this was so that he could live forever. Constantly changing the physical body of the host could, in a sense, achieve a kind of disguised immortality. As for Ghosthead Blade, he wanted to bring glory to his sect. Ghost Axe sect was recognized as the #1 killer sect in the circle, and had been founded by Numinous Mother. He was the 3rd disciple of this sect, after gorgeous itinerant and Taoist Tao Tai. In Ghost Axe sect, the strong were revered. Ghosthead Blade's lifelong wish was to complete the task assigned to him by his sect, kill 10,000 people and inherit the sect's true legacy. Thus, Ghosthead Blade didn't think he could die here, brat. I advise you to think of a way within 12 hours, or you'll die without a doubt, Ghosthead Blade said in a threatening voice. You don't have to tell me, I know. Wang Ming replied indifferently, I should be able to think of a way, but you know, functioning the brain consumes brain cells, and I get a headache whenever I think about things. Do you have anything to eat here? 2 walnuts would also be good for the brain. Ghost Head Blade's voice turned cold. What trick are you playing at? Trick? How would I dare? Wang Ming waved his hand with a weak expression. You should know that I'm just an ordinary person, and I can't go a day without food. Ghost Head Blade was instantly speechless. Because this was indeed the truth. And he had overlooked this point just now, forgetting that Wang Ming was just an ordinary person. What a troublesome brat. Here. Ghost Head Blade had no choice but to offer up his tonic. It was a red oval-shaped pill the size of a myrtle. This is a cheer-replenishing pill. Ghost Head Blade said. This was a level 4 elixir which was exceptionally expensive. Apart from healing injuries, it could also boost one's spirit and act as a fasting pill. This was the only elixir Ghost Head Blade had on him, which he had initially saved for the host's body. If the host's body was injured. Generally speaking, one pill could heal some of the damage, but now that he had lost his body, Ghost Head Blade naturally wouldn't be able to enjoy it. In this current situation, it was more important to work together for a win-win situation. He wanted Wang Ming to think of a way to get out of here first. Wang Ming's recovery would also be good for Ghost Head Blade if he wanted to possess Wang Ming later. In any case, after the possession was successful, this elixir would also be used to supplement the host. It was just a matter of time. Thanks. Wang Ming didn't stand on ceremony, and directly swallowed the elixir. Since Ghost Head Blade wanted him to think of a way in this situation, the elixir he gave him would definitely be a good one, and he definitely wouldn't give him poison. Sure enough, after taking the cheer-replenishing pill, its effects immediately showed, and Wang Ming felt his head instantly light up. This elixir just now had restored him by at least 50%, but Wang Ming didn't directly show it on his face, and instead frowned. This elixir of yours, it's not very effective. Ghost Head Blade sneered. Brat, this is the last elixir I have on me, it's enough to last you a few days. You can't find any other excuse now, right? Hurry up and think of a way. I've already given you the elixir, as for its effects, it's none of my business. Actually, Ghost Head Blade really couldn't guarantee the effectiveness of the elixir. For cultivators, spirit energy was needed to speed up the digestion of this type of high-level elixir. For an ordinary person, it might take a very long time to completely digest it. Ghost Head Blade didn't know enough about elixirs, since Ghost Axe sect only taught killer techniques. Half an hour after the elixir entered his stomach, Wang Ming had already sufficiently broken down its medicinal properties. Cultivators used spirit energy to speed up the digestion process, and Wang Ming used meditation. Meditation could achieve the same effect, but the prerequisite was that one had to have a powerful brain. If Wang Ming wanted to, he could even use meditation to lift himself slightly off the ground, but only for a very short time. On the bamboo raft, Ghost Head Blade was a little impatient. Brat, what's your plan? Wang Ming crossed his arms. Don't worry, I'm almost done. In fact, when Wang Ming had first observed the Dead Sea of Space, he had already thought of a way. Chapter 750. This Dead Sea of Space had absorbed too much trash from the outside world, and there were a lot of magic treasure fragments floating in it. If you were lucky, you might even find magic treasures that looked almost intact. However, after being drawn into the Dead Sea of Space, most of these magic treasures had already lost their effectiveness after being soaked in the Dead Sea of Space. The spirit liquid in the Dead Sea had a strong corrosive effect. Of course, that didn't rule out the possibility that some magic treasures could resist corrosion. If he wanted to break out of this Dead Sea of Space, Wang Ming deduced that corrosion resistance was especially important. Thus, these broken magic treasures floating in the Dead Sea of Space were in fact very useful. Perhaps he could find the parts he wanted. Wang Ming took off his white coat and belt. Unfortunately, Wang Ming thought that the long johns were too hot, so he had left them in the dormitory in the glass box instead of directly taking them out. Wang Ming had thought that since it was only the first day of the summer camp, there shouldn't be any accidents. In the end, he had ended up in this situation, only now did he realize the benefits of the Long Johns. The Long Johns had been personally enchanted by Wang Ling, and were especially useful in this situation. Ghost Head Blade didn't know exactly what Wang Ming wanted to do, but when he saw Wang Ming move, he immediately understood that the other party probably already had an idea. After taking off his white coat and unbuckling his belt, Wang Ming checked the spirit power in his storage ring. Currently, there was still 72% spirit power left, which was enough for him to carry out the follow-up plan. But Wang Ming couldn't directly say it out loud. This was one of his trump cards, and he absolutely couldn't let Ghost Head Blade know about it. Thus, he frowned deeply. Wang Ming frowned, and for some reason, Ghost Head Blade felt flustered. "Brat, what's wrong now?" Wang Ming clenched his fists and pretended to think about it. Then, his eyebrows furrowed deeply in an attempt to highlight the seriousness of the matter. "I've thought of an idea." "Go on." Ghost Head Blade said faintly. "Our research institute developed a device called the Spirit Power Amplification Cannon before." Wang Ming said, "This device can transform spirit energy into a substantial shock wave, which has the formidable power of moving 1,000 caddies with little effort. There are a lot of broken magic treasures floating in this dead sea of space. If I use these parts well, I can build one right away. It'll take me about 2 days." Wang Ming's words were very decisive and full of confidence. Ghost Head Blade did not doubt these words at all. The Dead Sea of Space was a place similar to a graveyard for magic treasures. In the past, too many almighty beings had torn apart space during their battles, causing magic treasures to be accidentally drawn into the Dead Sea of Space. Rumor had it that when the Crouching Bull's spiritual master fought the Crimson Firmament Emperor, Li Yao, their world-defying immortal warship had fallen into the Dead Sea of Space after the collision. That was a long time ago, so long that even Ghost Head Blade could not remember exactly how long it had been. If these two immortal ships were still here, they would definitely be an immeasurable fortune. This was because Crouching Bull Daoist and Crimson Sky Emperor Li Yao had once sealed many of their treasures in the safe in the immortal warship. No matter how corrosive the spatial spirit liquid was, it was impossible for it to corrode a special safe. Moreover, the two immortal warships were huge, and they were world-defying Dharma treasures. It was unlikely that their hulls would be corroded so easily. It was just a pity that these two world-defying immortal warships had drifted to who knew where in the Dead Sea of Space over the past 1,000 years. The Dead Sea of Space was boundless, and you never knew what kind of magic treasure fragments would float around you in the next moment. Hence, with a certain level of understanding of the Dead Sea of Space, Ghost Head Blade believed Wang Ming's words to the utmost. There were all kinds of magic treasure fragments floating around here that already looked completely useless, but this strongest brain might really have a way to use these fragments to remake magic treasures. However, Ghost Head Blade instantly fell silent when Wang Ming said that it would take 2 days to make them. 1 day. "I want you to make the magic treasure in 1 day, Ghost Head Blade said after a moment. There was a hint of coercion in his tone. He couldn't wait that long. 2 days was too long for him. Whether this magic treasure could send out a powerful shock wave to break through the Dead Sea of Space's barrier and take them out was still a question. If it failed, it would take time for Wang Ming to make a new magic treasure. However, his original body wouldn't allow him to wait that long. For Ghost Head Blade, the curse of the ancient artifact spirit was more like an uncertain time bomb. Hence, he needed Wang Ming to speed up and develop this thing as soon as possible. Only 1 day. Wang Ming's frown deepened. "It's not impossible, but you have to help. If you're sure that this cannon you're talking about will work, I can do it," Ghost Head Blade said. "It'll definitely work, I'm very confident." Wang Ming said, "When the cannon is fired, it'll definitely shatter this space wall and we'll be able to get out." But 1 day's time was really tight. You have to help. What do you want to do? Ghost Head Blade asked. I need spirit energy. Speaking up to this point, Wang Ming took out a toolbox from his storage ring and grinned. The tools in this toolbox can only be used if spirit energy is injected into them. If you want to make a magic treasure, you'll need to use the tools inside. You know, I'm a mortal, and I usually have assistants to help me in the lab. In a situation like this, you're the only one with spirit energy. Wang Ming's words were half true and half false. The tools in the toolbox did indeed require spirit energy to use, but he usually used the spirit energy sealed in his storage ring in the lab, and could do the work on his own. The ring on his hand wasn't just a storage ring, but also a storage ring. Although there was still 72% spirit energy in reserve, Wang Ming estimated that if he were to remake the magic treasure, he would need to use up at least 40% of his spirit energy, and his ultimate plan would end in failure. So from the very beginning, Wang Ming had just been playing tricks. Wang Ming had originally estimated that it would only take 1 day to make this magic treasure, but he had deliberately said 2 days to let Ghost Head Blade bargain. His goal was just to swindle Ghost Head Blade out of his spirit energy. Wang Ming took out the tools and lined them up on the bamboo raft that the heavenly materials sword had turned into. He then took a deep breath and stared at Ghost Head Blade. Hey, how about it? Do you want to cooperate? You're the one who wants to be fast, but in the end, you're the one who's dragging things out. Do you still want to get out? If you don't, we might as well die together. Fine. I can give you spirit energy. Ghost Head Blade grit his teeth, feeling extremely sullen. He felt resentful in his heart. But given the current situation, he could only endure it. He had already decided in his heart that the moment the magic treasure was ready, he would immediately take over Wang Ming's body. Ghost Head Blade sneered. In the end, this was just a hothead. Chapter 751. Wang Ling knew that Wang Ming was still alive. After Wang Ling had activated the mind-reading ability, all he had heard were the teachers in charge of this summer camp lamenting Wang Ling's death. He still had the paper crane, life talisman, that he had made for Wang Ming, which could be used to pay for Wang Ming's life once. But the life talisman had yet to take effect, which was enough to prove that Wang Ming wasn't dead. Furthermore, Wang Ling immediately deduced that Wang Ming was probably in the Dead Sea of space right now. However, in the hearts of most people, Wang Ming was already dead. Even Wu Zhenjuan was already preparing for Wang Ming's funeral. For example, a funeral photo. In order to protect his identity, Wang Ming had never taken an ID photo in his military uniform. Currently, the only official photo he had on file was the one taken when he had created the fake official ID, Wang Shower. In the ID photo, Wang Ming was wearing a dark black short-sleeved shirt and smiling very stupidly. Is this the only photo we have? Wu Zhenjuan sighed endlessly as he stared at Wang Ming's photo. That's right. Another accompanying teacher also sighed. Also, the higher-ups want us to prepare all the information on this incident. I understand. I'm writing up what happened, and I'm also writing up my reflection. Wu Zhenjuan nodded. Next, they could only wait for instructions from the higher-ups. According to Wu Zhenjuan's judgment, if Wang Ming was dead, the higher-ups would definitely directly publicize his identity. Although Wang Ming was just an ordinary person, he was the strongest brain, hiding behind the scenes in Huaxiu Nation all these years. Over the last 20 years or so, he had made great contributions to the technological breakthroughs in various cultivation magic treasures in Huaxiu Nation. Wang Ming's identity had to be kept a secret when he was alive. After his death, Wang Ming's identity and achievements would definitely be exposed in broad daylight. Perhaps Wang Ming's photo would be in next year's math, physics, and chemistry textbooks. Although the authorities only had this one ID photo of Wang Ming, Teacher Wang was also a poor man. I never thought that there would only be one photo. If I had known earlier, I would have taken a photo with him. The leading teacher sighed endlessly at the photo. Then what's the higher-ups' opinion? They thought that we would take some photos of Teacher Wang on the way, but in the end we didn't. The main thing was that the smile on the ID card was too silly and not serious at all. But now, there's no other way. Teacher Wang doesn't have a military uniform photo. The higher-up said to Photoshop the head of this photo onto the military uniform and make it into a memorial. Wu Zhenjuan, Wang Ling, elsewhere, in Huaxiao Alliance's headquarters, the entire headquarters had instantly gone into overdrive after Wang Ming's disappearance. The command center sent technical personnel to connect one-to-one with all the teachers who had gone out to search for Wang Ming in the real remains. In addition to providing relevant technical support remotely, they also helped these teachers connect with the expert group outside the remains. The main role of the group of external experts was to provide long-range support for the teachers who were heading west to search for Wang Ming's whereabouts. The main thing was that the western half of the remains had yet to be fully explored, and currently, only Huaxiao Alliance's team of experts had some unpublished information. The experience of the teachers in charge of the team was limited. If they encountered some poisonous spirit plants that they didn't recognize, as long as there were long-range experts around, they could basically avoid them. Inside the real remains, Huaxiao Alliance already knew the eastern half of the map like the back of their hand, and there basically wouldn't be any accidents. But the western half was still completely unknown. Even if Wang Ming was still alive, if the space spat him out in the western half, it would still be very dangerous. So at that time, President Qi had immediately instructed Wu Zhenjuan to assign some reliable teachers to search for Wang Ming's whereabouts in the west. Apart from Wang Ling, there was also President Qi, who believed all along that Wang Ming was still alive. After learning that Wang Ming was in trouble, President Qi put his hands behind his back and stared straight ahead in one direction for a very long time. General Yi and the other 10 generals had been watching this scene from beginning to end. General Yi hadn't expected old Qi, who was usually so protective of his children, to actually be so calm after learning of Wang Ming's death. But the truth was that General Yi had a hunch that this was all just a facade. After about 10 minutes, President Qi finally moved. He turned around and looked at General Yi. "Old Yi, I need you to help me look after the place." "All right." General Yi agreed straight away. He didn't say another word. The moment President Qi turned around, General Yi and the other 10 generals present already knew what on earth President Qi was going to do. In everyone's eyes, old Qi was a well-behaved person who had always done things according to the rules. Of course, this didn't mean that old Qi didn't have a bottom line. It had already been more than 4,000 years since Huaxiao Nation had been founded. As one of the 10 founding generals, old Qi's cultivation was naturally unfathomable. But in the thousands of years before he met Wang Ming, this wisdom saint had never accepted a single disciple. All of the 10 generals present remembered old Qi's delighted expression when he discovered Wang Ming back then, as if he had just become a father. Furthermore, at the beginning, they had all been amazed by old Qi's choice. Some of them even couldn't figure out why old Qi would choose such an ordinary person as his disciple. But in the end, it turned out that old Qi's choice was the right one. Wang Ming's appearance had indeed repeatedly provided major breakthroughs in some of the technical problems with magic treasures. Old Qi had restricted Wang Ming's movements, hidden his real information, and protected this disciple of his as if he were the apple of his eye. Now, something had happened to Wang Ming. In fact, everyone's hearts were as clear as a mirror. Old Qi. Thus, when old Qi reached the entrance of Huaxiao Alliance's headquarters, Marshal Jiang called out to him. President Qi stopped and turned his head slightly. "What is it? What's done can't be changed. You have to act appropriately." This was Marshal Jiang's reminder. President Qi understood. After a moment of silence, he spoke again. "But someone hurt my disciple, so I naturally have to go and demand an explanation. That Night Chief is indeed quite formidable. But I think it's fine to give him a warning. If His Excellency the head of state finds out, he'll definitely be furious. I've already made up my mind. If the head of state punishes me later, I'll take the blame. President Xi pinched his mustache. You haven't accepted a disciple you're proud of, have you? You definitely don't understand what I'm doing today, but I believe that you'll understand in the future. Marshal Jiang was instantly speechless. Also, let me correct one thing. Chapter 752. The 10 generals had all come from that era, and each of them had very deep private friendships with each other, which was why Huaxiao Nation was what it was today. If the 10 generals hadn't been united, the country would have long been riddled with internal strife. Of course, the 10 generals had anticipated from the night chief incident that there might be a mole in Huaxiao Alliance's management. However, this matter still needed to be investigated slowly, because they didn't have any concrete evidence. It would naturally be best if they could catch the culprit red-handed. The moment something happened to Wang Ming, General Yi, Marshal Jiang, and the others had already had a premonition that Old Qi would definitely step forward. Old Qi was famous for being protective of his own. Especially at the Research Institute, Wang Ming had always been secretly reported by jealous colleagues, but before these reports could reach Huaxiao Alliance, Old Qi had stopped them with one hand and destroyed them. Old Qi often said, geniuses were always envied. When he was young, Old Qi had suffered a lot because of this. But shielding was one thing, and educating was another. Geniuses all appreciated each other. Although Wang Ming was sometimes arrogant, he had absolute respect for Old Qi. They lived like master and disciple at work, and like father and son in life. For Old Qi, after he retired one day, Wang Ming was the only person who could take on the position of wisdom saint. Although in the eyes of most people, Wang Ming was still very young and was still lacking in all sorts of ways, from the moment President Xi had discovered him, he had been almost certain that this person was the only hope and expectation he had left in his life. Old Qi didn't leave the Huaxiao Alliance building, but went to his office. He wanted to give those people at night chief a warning. But that didn't mean he had to go overseas. Old Qi knew his identity as one of the 10 generals. If he went out like this, it wouldn't just be the head of state who would be alarmed, but the entire international media would be shaken. Thus, President Xi had already made up his mind to use a practical method. Is everything ready? When he returned to the office, a young man was already waiting for Old Qi. This was Old Qi's office assistant, Qi Mingyu. Old Qi didn't have a family, and Qi Mingyu was Old Qi's adopted son, as well as a trusted aide whom Old Qi had brought up. He wasn't a genius in cultivation, but he was still passable. Qi Mingyu was a lot older than Wang Ming, and the two of them were like brothers who weren't related by blood, but were as close as real brothers. Everything is ready. The equipment was just tested a few days ago. There won't be any problems, Qi Mingyu replied. When he found out that something had happened to Wang Ming, Qi Mingyu knew that Old Qi might make a move, but he never thought that Old Qi would actually go this far for Wang Ming. The last time Old Qi activated the equipment in his office was when they were fighting against the demon gods hundreds of years ago. In fact, this set of equipment was actually a set of spiritual power amplification diffusion device. The design of the device was very simple. As long as one sat on the sofa in the space capsule and put on a wireless helmet, they would be able to complete the spiritual power amplification. Once he put on the helmet, with Old Qi's current mental strength combined with specific cultivation spells, he could easily communicate with people in every corner of the earth, and he could even perform long-range mental attacks. This amplifier had already been upgraded to version 8.0, and Wang Ming had personally completed the last version update. Mingyu, stand guard outside the door. No one is allowed to come in, President Qi said to Qi Mingyu. President Qi then turned a knob in a secret compartment on his desk, and the bookshelf behind him instantly opened to reveal a safe the size of a Rubik's Cube. President Qi looked at it, and the safe opened automatically. With a spirit light, President Chi was directly sucked into the Rubik's Cube. The entire set of equipment had been shrunk using space expansion technology before it was placed inside the safe. This safe came with an array that shrank the Earth to inches, and after confirming one's identity with the pupil, the array would automatically activate. On the other side, Wang Ming was examining the tools on the bamboo raft. As promised, Ghost Head Blade had already injected enough spirit energy into the toolbox for Wang Ming to use. After some calculations, Wang Ming realized that there was still plenty of spirit energy in the toolbox. When the time came, he would store the extra spirit energy back into the ring. This is the blueprint for the amplifier. In order to ensure that it can blast through the space wall here, my design parameters are much larger than the original, so that it can hit the target in one shot. It took Wang Ming 10 minutes or so to use the drawing board and the toolbox to draw out the blueprint of the entire amplification cannon, including the parameters of each part, and the corresponding formula at the bottom. Ghost Head Blade didn't really understand it, but this blueprint gave him a strong sense of security. Looking at the blueprint, Ghost Head Blade suddenly asked, "I heard that you're Wisdom Saint's disciple?" "That's right." Wang Ming was non-committal. Since the other party had already asked, it was enough to prove that he had definitely investigated something, so there was no point in hiding it. "Our old Chi also has an amplification cannon, and I designed the latest version, so I'm very familiar with these parameters." Wang Ming said, "At the very beginning, the prototype of this device was actually a spirit amplifier. After old Chi developed it, he gave it to a foreign mutants organization. There was a professor who used this device to recruit all kinds of people, and even set up a mutant school. But there was a flaw in the original design. After using too many spirit amplifiers, it was very easy for someone to go bald, so it didn't take long for this professor to become bald. And this mutant school is still around. When I went abroad with old Chi before, I even went there to take a look." Ghost Head Blade was suddenly curious and scared. "Are you a smith?" "No, I'm just an inventor," Wang Ming replied. In a broad sense, smiths mainly use furnaces to refine weapons. After smelting the materials, they grind them into shape, and finally imbue them with magic and spirit. But for ordinary people like us who don't have spirit energy, as long as we're smart enough and are good at using modern technology, we can also make magic treasures. However, this type of magic treasure has a dual energy mechanism. Regular magic treasures forged by smiths need spirit energy to drive them, but the scientific magic treasures we forge can be powered by both rechargeable spirit energy and spirit energy. Ghost Head Blade hummed in agreement. "What you said is what I understand." Actually, Ghost Head Blade's understanding of refining weapons was very limited. If it wasn't for Wang Ming, he probably wouldn't have known that there was actually such a difference between modern magic treasures. What Wang Ming needed to do now was to fully establish Ghost Head Blade's trust. Chapter 753. At Night Chief HQ, Night Ghost Spirit Emperor looked to be in a very good mood. Although his real body hadn't had direct contact with the head of state, at the very least he had successfully met that bigwig in Dark Fragrances body this time, and wasn't at a disadvantage at all. What did this mean? If he wrote a news report about this later and sent it to all the major media outlets, his Night Chief's momentum would grow even stronger. When that time came, the new members it would recruit would greatly bolster Night Chief's strength and make up for the losses it had suffered in carrying out its master plan in Huaxiao Nation this time. Only Night Ghost Spirit Emperor himself knew that whether or not level 13 spells existed in the real remains wasn't important. What was important was the impact of this collision, as well as the momentum and impact it would have. It was only in recent years since Night Chief had been established that the governments and militaries of various countries had set their sights on it. But no country had dared to rashly make a move against Night Chief. Why? Because Night Chief's foundation was much more stable than that of the other dark forces. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor had endured for hundreds of years to form Night Chief's core personnel and devote himself to developing scientific research and technology. Night Chief now had the ability to produce magic crystals, and more than that, the magic crystals they produced were still better than the average level in various countries, and they already had the ability to produce them in batches. What did this mean? It meant that when the time came, as long as Night Chief's members had high-level magic crystals, they would be a sufficient deterrent. Thus, it looked like Night Chief's plan to invade the remains this time had ended in failure. But the truth was that Night Ghost Spirit Emperor was really interested in the international influence it would bring. As for President Dylan, who might be sacrificed because of this master plan, and even Edmark, who might die before the plan could be carried out, Night Ghost Spirit Emperor didn't feel the slightest heartache over the deaths of these two people. In exchange for international influence at the cost of losing two of their top generals, in Night Ghost Spirit Emperor's view, this was a very good deal. Even if the people were gone, they could still recruit more. But influence wasn't something that could be easily exchanged for. Of course, there was also an unexpected factor in this incident that worried Night Ghost Spirit Emperor, that mysterious expert hidden in the ranks. With just one release of his aura, all those activated cells had actually shrunk back like turtles. Who on earth was that expert? This was a mystery, but Night Ghost Spirit Emperor had a vague answer to this person's identity. He was basically convinced that this mysterious expert was the same person as the youngster who had killed President Bai. However, he did not know what the young man looked like. The only clue he had was the young man's brother. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor didn't know everything about Wang Ming. At the very beginning, Night Chief hadn't been able to fully investigate Wang's identity. But Night Ghost Spirit Emperor predicted that this person's identity wouldn't be simple, because the personal information on the ID card was too fake. If he wanted to know the youngster's specific identity, this close to him, Wang Spirit Emperor's Ghost King Mo, the ghost of the best would be. If he wanted to know the young man's identity, this elder brother of his was the best shortcut. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor fiddled with the screen in the air as he looked at Wang Ming's information. Wang Ming didn't have any extra photos, and the one Night Ghost Spirit Emperor was looking at now was that very stupid ID photo. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor narrowed his eyes and instructed one of his subordinates, "Continue to follow up on this person. Report to me as soon as you have the latest information." This was the third president under him, Long Ming, an insect emissary, wearing a very thick chemical protective suit and a gas mask on his face. But after Night Ghost Spirit Emperor gave his instructions, Long Ming uncharacteristically didn't respond. Something didn't seem right. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor stood up, and his eyes turned sharp as he instantly became vigilant. In the next moment, Long Ming actually launched an attack on him. Pitch-black poisonous bees gushed out from the gaps of his protective suit like a tide. He knew that Long Ming was probably being controlled. Otherwise, even if Long Ming was given 1,000 guts, he wouldn't have dared to directly attack him. With a wave of his hand, Night Ghost Spirit Emperor unleashed a 5th-tier ice spell. Surging ice mist spewed out of his palm, instantly freezing the wasps into ice cubes that fell to the ground like snowflakes, shattering into pieces. At the same time, Night Ghost Spirit Emperor gave a low cry, "Long Ming, wake up!" This low cry was mixed with a sound wave spell which could purify the mind and free a person whose mind was being controlled. However, the mental strength of the person controlling Long Ming was far beyond Night Ghost Spirit Emperor's imagination. This level 6 sound wave spell, Sound of Excitement, had no effect on Long Ming at all. In the stalemate, Night Ghost Spirit Emperor looked out of the corner of his eye and saw that apart from him, everyone else in Night Chief's command center was actually being controlled. Each and every one of them seemed to be frozen in time as they maintained their positions. This was an illusion caused by mental power controlling the brain's thoughts, as if time had stopped. It was clear that this Almighty had used his mental strength to track down the location of Night Chief's headquarters and had launched this surprise attack. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor's heart trembled. It looked like he would have to change the location of the headquarters again. After he had been hit by the implementation ball previously, he had already changed the location of the headquarters. Who would have thought that before the first wave was over, another wave would come? At the same time, Night Ghost Spirit Emperor also deduced the identity of this person. I know who your excellency is. Apart from the commander of Huaxiao Nation's side and one of the famous 10 generals, Wisdom Saint, who else could possess such unimaginably powerful mental strength? President Qi didn't say anything, but manipulated this insect envoy called Long Ming to launch an even fiercer attack. Tens of thousands of insects poured out and actually formed a maze of their own to surround Night Ghost Spirit Emperor. Petty tricks. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor sighed softly. With a gentle flick of his sleeve, these spirit insects were directly wiped out by a ball of starfire. The instant he wiped out these spirit insects, Long Ming actually took the initiative to charge at him and launch an attack. Insect attacks are Long Ming's specialty. If you control his mind, you should use what he's good at. Long Ming's close-range skills are the worst. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor didn't bother to hide his sneer. The next moment, he saw Long Ming wave his arm, and a slap was aimed directly at his face. Long Ming usually only tickles me when he hits me in close range. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor laughed again, very happily. He didn't defend himself at all, and took the initiative to stretch out half his face. Come, hit me here. Long Ming's body paused. It was clear that the person controlling Long Ming's mind had been frightened by Night Ghost Spirit Emperor's action. In the next moment. Paw! As Long Ming's slap landed solidly on his face, Night Ghost Spirit Emperor's expression changed dramatically. Like a cannonball, Night Ghost Spirit Emperor was sent flying out of the command post by this slap. On the other side, inside the military tent, Wang Ling withdrew his mental strength. This was the first time he had seen someone voluntarily stretch out their face for him to slap. He had never heard such a strange request. Chapter 754. Please listen to it on NetEase Cloud Music. Kugu Music and QQ Music will be released simultaneously in the next week. The helplessness of the immortal king, the hopelessness of the mortal king, singing, the old is the old and feather sacrifice rabbit, Joshua Joren and Yu Ji Xiao 2, arrangement, mill composition, Shinduis, mix, Ding Air, Dinger, lyrics/original book, Ku Xian. English lyrics. Last night I cultivated until the 3rd hour stageable night till femerning troubled by a trifle worried about some anything who can see the helplessness of the immortal king Telmu can see who helplessest thing one gene of. Flying talismans arising gene of flying talismans tell the past who listen stills without it. Or out my true wish is world peace mainly onetruishis. In fact for world peace school life is like duckweed school life is like duckweed school if I like ketaqueed drifting and drifting meeting and parting chasing the dream all the way chasing the dream that's fair in front remembering the elves I caught in my childhood recall the Ilvest Hadia Kautasium kid remembering the embarrassing scenes of those years recalled Hosea Dair Santima Sophia years. Holding hands and looking up hold me hand raise your head I have seen every year's brocade see the splendor of feature do not look back with rhythm don't look back you set the bite ballad of the immortal sing the mortal s ballad strut with head up and chest out walk ahead keep your head high as long as you I aware here fate will not get out of hand I will never lose me. Chapter 755. The sudden appearance of the sword spirit left Wang Ming and Ghost Head Blade dumbfounded. Logically speaking, as an ordinary person without spirit energy, it was almost impossible for Wang Ming to give birth to a sword spirit with his mortal body. But even Ghost Head Blade couldn't find a reasonable explanation for what had just happened. This was the daily life of the immortal king, not the diary of a cohabitation with a sword spirit. Could it really be his birthday halo? For a moment, Wang Ming felt that this explanation actually wasn't unreasonable. After all, Wang Ling would always give Wang Ling a present in advance on his birthday in the past. At this summer camp, he had deliberately pulled Wang Ling into the same room as him, which was in fact a hint that Wang Ling could give him a present. But after waiting for a long time, Wang Ling still hadn't given him a present. In this unusual situation, Wang Ming actually had a feeling that Wang Ling might have arranged for this sword spirit to automatically attach itself to his heavenly material sword on his birthday. Because Wang Ming himself clearly remembered telling Wang Ling a while ago that he was improving the heavenly material sword. At that time, the summer camp hadn't started yet, so if this sword spirit had really been sent by Wang Ling, he indeed had plenty of time to make arrangements. Thinking this, Wang Ming cupped his chin and carefully sized up the long-haired young man in front of him. Suddenly, he remembered the self-introduction of this sword spirit with dead fish eyes. "Wait, you said you're called Kuan Shan." The young man nodded. "That was my name in my previous life. The new Lord Sword Master can call me Heavenly Materials. The name of a sword spirit follows the name of the Sword Master's sword." "You actually remember your previous life?" Wang Ming was startled. He looked at the dark blue spirit sword in his hand. He remembered that it was called Kuan Shan. It couldn't be such a coincidence, right? "Of course I remember." The young man sighed. "In my previous life, the previous sword master tricked me and I unfortunately fell into the dead sea of space. Now that I've been summoned by Heavenly Tao to meet the new Lord Sword Master, I never thought that we would still be in this vast ocean. It seems that this really is fate. May I ask if Lord Sword Master is traveling right now?" "No," Wang Ming shook his head. "Look carefully, this is the dead sea of space." The young man, Heavenly Material, seemed to have suffered a blow, and didn't speak for a long time. He just gazed at the boundless dead sea of space with watery eyes, his expression a little sad, as if the memory of his previous life had just happened yesterday. The memories of the sword spirit would not disappear. Destroying itself was equivalent to abandoning the original sword master. The calamity of falling into the Heavenly Tao's reincarnation was the punishment of the Heavenly Tao. He had experienced the calamity of reincarnation for more than 100 years before he was finally freed and reborn. Who would have thought that he would go such a big circle and come back? Heavenly materials are of heavenly materials a heaven. After all, heave. After Wang of heaved heavens, Ming, Tian of God. Wang of God, Ming Ling, sword cultivator, Ming. Chen. Wang, Ming of king, Ming. Master, Chen. Chen. Ming spirit too. He. Ming, Blade, Sword. Ming. Ling. Ling, He, Ghost-Head Blade instantly gave off a sinister and ferocious aura. Heavenly Material shrugged. "I don't think I can." Wang Ming, "So, you'd better stay alive." Heavenly Materials, however, Wang Ming also noticed a very interesting phenomenon. Although they both had dead fish eyes, it seemed that the less they spoke, the stronger they were. In the blink of an eye, half a day had passed. Wang Ming had already assembled more and more parts from the broken magic treasures on the surface of the sea, and put them all away in his storage ring. "Help me cut this." Wang Ming gave a rice cooker magic treasure that he had fished up to Heavenly Materials. There was a broken talisman seal on it, and Wang Ming speculated that it was probably some kind of sealing magic treasure. Because of Heavenly Materials' appearance, the cutting speed of the item was greatly increased, which just so happened to solve Wang Ming's urgent problem. Heavenly Materials' appearance wasn't completely useless. Although Ghost-Head Blade didn't say anything, he had been watching from the side the whole time. Every time he asked Wang Ming about the progress, Wang Ming would say that it was almost done. Ghost-Head Blade needed to wait for Wang Ming to assemble the thing before he made his move. Although the rice cooker that he had fished up was already broken, it contained what Wang Ming wanted the most. He wanted to transform it into a hub that could be embedded with a spirit power core, and use the hub as a power source to finally control the entire machine. What he wanted to invent wasn't just a spirit power amplifier. Instead, it was a humanoid, wearable magic treasure similar to Head of State 001. But Wang Ming felt that even if he invented this machine, it could only be used once at most, because he had calculated many of the parameters on the design blueprint in his head. It wasn't that he wasn't confident in his mental calculations, but that the best way to assemble such a complicated machine was to use scientific equipment to make precise deductions, and only after repeated calculations hundreds of times would a better result be achieved. Now, Wang Ming could only ensure that the machine he had invented was as durable as possible, and that it would be able to weather the storm. After all, the materials he had collected now weren't afraid of the spatial spirit liquid's corrosion, and would have no problem withstanding the spatial storm. In any case, it was fine as long as they could leave this dead sea of space. Time ticked by. At that moment, Ghosthead Blade finally sensed that something wasn't right. He had seen the blueprint for the spirit power amplification cannon which Wang Ming had provided him, and there weren't as many parts on it as there were now. Although he didn't know what these parts were for or what they were used for, Ghosthead Blade felt that he could still count them. His math teacher had died early, and he himself wasn't very educated, but he still knew 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Brat, what on earth are you playing at? The small pitch-black blade was already floating in the air, emitting a frightening pressure. While Wang Ming had been assembling the machine, Ghosthead Blade hadn't been idle either. He had been adjusting his breathing all this time. The spirit energy in the dead sea of space was very thin, but it wasn't non-existent. After such a long time, Ghosthead Blade had recovered a lot. Done. Just as Ghosthead Blade asked this question, Wang Ming had finished bottling the last part, the spirit power hub. Heavenly treasure. Cover me. At that moment, Wang Ming got up and inserted the ring which contained spirit energy into the spirit power hub. In the next moment, countless parts flew out of the ring and, as if they had been given life, wrapped Wang Ming up tightly from head to toe. Heavenly treasure turned pale with fright. Lord Sword Master, he knew that Wang Ming was just an ordinary person, but when Wang Ming had been assembling the machine just now, Heavenly Treasure had also noticed something special about him. It turned out that his sword master wasn't ordinary at all, but a genuine genius. Damn it, how dare you lie to me? You didn't make an amplification cannon at all. Ghosthead Blade finally realized that he had been deceived, and flew into a rage as he prepared to attack Wang Ming. No, I did. Wang Ming smiled and shook his head. He had indeed made a spirit power amplification cannon, but he had put it in the form of parts on the left and right arms of his mecha armor. How is that possible? You're just a mortal. How can you defeat a cultivator? Ghosthead Blade roared. I'm no longer Wang Ming. Wang Ming stared at Ghosthead Blade, his expression instantly turning cold. I am Nuhula Wang Ming. That was it. At that moment, Wang Ming raised his right arm. An automatic aiming lens had already appeared out of thin air in his eye sockets. Everything was done in one go. This mecha armor had an automatic mechanism to identify killing intent, and it almost instantly locked onto Ghosthead Blade. At that moment, Ghosthead Blade was actually so frightened that he froze. Chapter 756. Ghosthead Blade had never felt this intense sense of crisis before Wang Ming made his appearance in full armor. Even in his current injured state, Wang Ming was just an ant that Ghosthead Blade could crush at any time he wanted in his normal state. Wang Ming was very smart, but in the end, he was just an ordinary person, so it wasn't a big deal. This was what Ghosthead Blade had always thought before Wang Ming was fully armed. But as it turned out, Ghosthead Blade's attitude was still a little too arrogant. Nowadays, in the era of national cultivation, those cultivators with a certain level of cultivation always had a contemptuous attitude towards ordinary people, and the number of such cultivators was actually not small, almost half of the population. Hence, as an ordinary person, Wang Ming was teaching cultivators like Ghosthead Blade, who looked down on ordinary people, a lesson. Knowledge was power, knowledge could indeed change one's fate. Take this. Following Wang Ming's roar, the aiming lens had already locked onto Ghosthead Blade with precision. Although Ghosthead Blade was currently just a blade and was very small, Wang Ming had already considered this factor long ago, and had changed the Spirit Power Amplification Cannon into a Spirit Power Amplification Tracking Cannon. No need to hold your breath. No need to cheat. It could also automatically lock onto you. Identify killing intent. Self-aim for a headshot. But because the recoil of this cannon was extremely strong, the moment it was fired, Wang Ming's entire body was swiftly sent flying backward. This clumsy assembly of magic treasures was made from waste magic treasures from the Dead Sea of Space, and the weight of the materials in each part wasn't particularly uniform. Wang Ming had already done his best to compare the materials and find magic treasures with similar densities. Wang Ming had already done his best to compare the materials and find magic treasures of similar density, but after firing this cannon, Wang Ming was still deeply aware of the mecha armor's flaws. He would just take it as experimental data. Wang Ming was already determined that after he got out of here, he would build a second-generation mecha as soon as possible. The powerful recoil made Wang Ming's arm ache, but it was still within the limits of what he could endure. The pain was like a muscle being stretched. As he was sent flying backward by the recoil, the mecha armor's suspension stabilizer was activated at the same time. Seeing this, heavenly materials hurriedly turned into a stream of light and flew behind Wang Ming to support him against the recoil together. Accompanied by an intense wave of light, an enormous umbrella-shaped beam of light shot straight in Ghosthead Blade's direction. For a moment, the spirit power in the Dead Sea of Space surged, and the spirit liquid water instantly evaporated into clouds of steam. Ghosthead Blade realized that he couldn't dodge the cannon shot. It was a homing cannon, and the moment it fired, he was locked onto. Damn, a mere mortal also wanted to show off in front of him. Hidden Ghost Blade technique. Ghosthead Blade knew that he wouldn't be able to avoid it, so he used his blade technique and slashed at the light cannon. A dazzling purple saber gleam lit up in the void and rushed towards the light cannon, attempting to split it in half. But in the end, Ghosthead Blade had still underestimated Wang Ming's blast. He was already injured, and although he had recovered some spirit energy earlier, it had been stored up for the purpose of possessing Wang Ming's body, and the strength he had saved up was far from enough. Blade Ming of Wang Blade Ming's light cannon. In the end, this mecha armor, which had been assembled from discarded magic treasures in the Dead Sea of Space, was beyond Ghosthead Blade's imagination. In the end, this mecha armor, which had been assembled from discarded magic treasures in the Dead Sea of Space, was beyond Ghosthead Blade's imagination. Even heavenly materials behind him was amazed. His master was just an ordinary person, but had actually relied on this mecha armor to fight a cultivator who was almost at the soul formation stage. Is he dead? In the distance, Wang Ming was standing in the air by relying on the mecha armor's suspension system. Wang Ming had previously invented a flying device for himself, so he wasn't weak in terms of proficiency and balance when it came to flying. Furthermore, Wang Ming hadn't come up with this humanoid mecha armor magic treasure on a whim in the Dead Sea of Space. The blueprint had long since been etched deeply into his mind. He had had this idea as early as when he had been researching the humanoid magic treasure head of State 001, but he had never put it into practice. Wang Ming had now relied on discarded magic treasures to assemble this mecha armor purely because he had no other choice, since he was still at the stage of collecting the materials for the real mecha armor. Apart from testing head of State 001's performance, following Wang Ling, spying on him, peeping on him, bullying him, teasing him, and asking him for a birthday present, Wang Ming's biggest goal as a teacher at the summer camp this time was to collect the main materials for the mecha armor. This had been approved by Huaxiao Alliance, and Wang Ming could freely and appropriately choose his own materials in the remains. This was a privilege which old Qi had given him, and Wang Ming still had that document stamped with his seal on it. Wang Ming gazed at the rolling steam in front of him and sighed softly. Because this mecha armor still lacked the auxiliary ability of spiritual perception, and Wang Ming himself wasn't a cultivator, he had no way of determining whether Ghosthead Blade was dead or not. But he was sure that Ghosthead Blade had definitely been severely injured by that blow just now. Even if he wasn't dead, Ghosthead Blade already didn't have the strength to struggle. In the days to come, his body was bound to disintegrate bit by bit as it soaked in the spatial spirit fluid, and his soul would then suffer the curse of the ancient artifact spirit. Heavenly Materials' question confirmed Wang Ming's thoughts at the moment. Lord Sword Master, do you want to give him the last hit? He already doesn't have the strength to struggle. Forget it. Wang Ming shook his head. Actually, it wasn't that he didn't want to give him the last hit, but that blast just now had directly used up 32% of his spirit power. The spirit power hub only had 40% of its reputation left. He had to save up this spirit power to break through the space wall and get out. Thus, Wang Ming no longer paid attention to Ghosthead Blade. Instead, he flew as high as possible. If there's a space storm later, do your best to protect me. Very well, Lord Sword Master. Heavenly Materials' response was very gentle. The Master of Immortal Mansion had carefully selected and polished this material, and it was the only one in the world. It was so hard that it didn't fear a space storm at all. Then, Heavenly Materials took the initiative to hug Wang Ming's lower back, ready to resist the impact of the spirit power blast. Ready, Wang Ming took a deep breath and counted down from 3 in his heart. There was a loud bang. He raised his hand and fired the second blast at the very top of the dead sea of space. This blast was a resurrection blast, and it was also Wang Ming's oath as an ordinary person. After this blast, Wang Ming would reappear in the world with a new identity. Chapter 757. On the other side, Night Ghost Spirit Emperor, who Wang Ling had borrowed President Qi's mental energy to possess insect envoy Long Ming and had slapped him, finally woke up from his coma. But even though he had woken up, he was in very poor condition, and didn't even have the strength to get up. This slap wasn't like the ones he had given Evil Sword God back then. Wang Ling had undone half of the talisman seal, so even if he didn't use all his strength, it was still 50%. Combined with all the slaps he had given so far, this slap was of very high quality. In terms of grades, Evil Sword God's slaps could only be classified as ordinary slaps. Further up were slightly serious slap, very serious slap, extremely serious slap, expert appraisal slap, and ultimate Buddha's palm. And this slap just now just happened to reach the very serious slap level. This slap hadn't just hit his body, even Night Ghost Spirit Emperor's soul had been shaken, and he had suffered pain and torture. At that moment, although Night Ghost Spirit Emperor had already woken up, he couldn't move at all. He felt as if every acupuncture point and pore had become an erupting volcano, and he was burning with pain. That kind of mental energy just now, he was sure that it was definitely Huaxiao Nation's Wisdom Saint. He was very familiar with that aura. Although he had never fought Wisdom Saint face to face before, Night Ghost Spirit Emperor believed that he had a certain understanding of him. The other party was good at using mental energy to control things from afar, and in this world, the only person who could use mental energy to this extent was Wisdom Saint. Mental energy was a kind of power that was cultivated from a young age, and was different from spirit energy. It didn't need to be used on a spirit route, but it was extremely difficult to cultivate. President Qi's actual combat ability wasn't strong, because his mental energy had already reached the pinnacle. As far as Night Ghost Spirit Emperor knew, there was no one in this world who could cultivate mental energy and spirit energy at the same time. This was the principle that you couldn't have your cake and eat it too. So although this slap had landed on Night Ghost Spirit Emperor, he had never expected it to be from Wang Ling, as he wailed endlessly. he just felt that the power of this slap was too inconceivable. Huaxiao Alliance, it seemed that he really couldn't underestimate this place. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor suddenly felt that he knew too little about the 10 generals, and that he had to investigate them in depth. He had always thought that President Qi was just a mental expert, and never expected him to have such terrifying attainments in cultivation. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor realized that he had made a mistake. Sometimes, know yourself and know your enemy, and you will emerge victorious. In this world, there were people who made mistakes every day. It wasn't too late to find out the truth now. Otherwise, when little sister Milk Tea was little sister Matcha. At that time, it would be too late to regret it. As he lay on the ground enduring the pain of the slap, Night Ghost Spirit Emperor pondered this thought-provoking thought. After about 10 minutes, there was still no movement from Night Chief. That slap had sent him too far away, and Night Ghost Spirit Emperor was now lying in the Gobi Desert. Who knew how long it would take for those idiots to find him? So in the end, Night Ghost Spirit Emperor could only think of a way to save himself. His injuries were severe, and he could only constantly release perfected immortal true Qi to heal his injuries. However, the slap just now had the effect of severely injuring him. Even if he used perfected immortal true Qi, the rate at which his injuries recovered was like a snail climbing a tree. It was a pain in the ass. Poor Night Ghost Spirit Emperor could only slowly recover from his injuries and start to try to move his fingers. In this kind of situation, he could only cast some one-handed healing spells. Thus, another 20 minutes passed. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor could finally move one of his fingers. This was the moment. Great Soul Cultivation Spell. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor only used one finger to make a seal. In a split second, with Night Ghost Spirit Emperor at its center, a deep blue magic array with complex runes appeared on the ground. Light lingered over the magic array, and countless souls hovered above Night Ghost Spirit Emperor's head to repair his soul. This Great Soul Cultivation spell was something Night Ghost Spirit Emperor had created based on the Dark Pastor collection of a foreign forbidden technique, the Bible of Darkness. In theory, it was also a forbidden technique that couldn't be recognized internationally. Its main principle was to use the souls that Night Ghost Spirit Emperor was constantly devouring to control them and turn them into his slaves to heal his soul's injuries. Once these summoned souls ran out of soul power, they would be completely annihilated. But from the moment he incorporated these souls, they had already become his slaves and were pawns that he could discard at any time. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor closed his eyes and enjoyed the comfort of these souls being repaired. Although he was now lying on the ground in the Gobi Desert, it felt like he was in an outdoor spa. A moment later, Night Ghost Spirit Emperor's arms and hands were mostly healed, and he could already move. He made another seal and checked his soul warehouse, which contained all the souls he had devoured over the last 100 years. That's right, that brat Bai Zhe. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor suddenly smiled sinisterly as he thought of President Bai. He had just devoured President Bai's soul a while ago, and he still remembered that President Bai's ability to recover was extremely strong. Just in time, I'll use Baiji's soul to help my venerable self recover. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor's wishful thinking was very good. Thus, when his soul was almost 20 to 30% healed, he summoned someone from his soul warehouse. Bai Zhe, come out. A white figure slowly appeared in front of him. This person was none other than President Bai, whom Night Ghost Spirit Emperor had devoured. It was obvious that President Bai had been tortured in the soul warehouse. His hair was disheveled and his cheeks were sunken in. The environment of the soul warehouse was similar to that of a prison. Tens of thousands of strong souls were imprisoned here, and new souls would definitely receive the so-called baptism of newbies. Bai Zhe, you look a lot more haggard. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor chuckled. You're not qualified to say that. President Bai stared at Night Ghost Spirit Emperor's sorry figure and said in an icy voice. Kneel. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor only gave the order, but President Bai's knees already couldn't help but bend down. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor raised his hand and lifted President Bai's chin with the air of someone who held great power. Now, you're my slave. No matter how sorry I look, as a soul slave, I advise you to be careful with your words. Otherwise, it wouldn't be good if you were turned to ashes. If I want to, I can throw you into the great soul-repairing spells array at any time as raw material, understand? Chapter 758. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor was lying on the ground, enjoying the massage from the great soul cultivation array's soul slave, and he had a very lazy expression on his face. President Bai was still kneeling in front of him. Originally, I only wanted to keep you in the soul vault and wait for the opportunity to digest you and obtain your recovery ability. However, I've changed my mind. Do you know why? Night Ghost Spirit Emperor suddenly said. President Bai pursed his lips and said nothing. After waiting for a while, Night Ghost Spirit Emperor could only answer his own question. The Bai clan's creation art is #1 in the world. It's as famous as the Toya clan's unusual elixir technique and the Shao clan's alchemy technique. If I hadn't taken you in as my subordinate, you would have been executed by your clansmen. Later, with my help, you inherited the orthodoxy of the White Clan, which is why you have your current status. President Bai's face instantly darkened. Your Excellency, what do you want to say? If I devour your soul and seize your technique, I will instantly know all the memories in your mind. However, I personally saved you back then, so I really can't bear to kill you now. Although you've made a huge mistake this time, I still plan to spare your life on account of our past friendship. If I hadn't used the 10,000 Li soul chase to keep your soul, how long do you think you could have lasted against that young man? Night Ghost Spirit Emperor said. President Bai was instantly speechless. Even his body began to tremble uncontrollably. Ever since he had been beaten by Wang Ling, he would suffer from this kind of aftereffect from time to time. Every time he thought of it, it was fear. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor smiled softly and crooked his finger, and a white jade scroll appeared in the air. President Bai took it with both hands, and was amazed to find that he could actually directly touch the scroll as a soul. This is a soul book, an item used to communicate with spirit bodies. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor said, I want you to write down the cultivation method of the creation art on this jade scroll, word for word. President Bai finally knew what Night Ghost Spirit Emperor was going to do, and his expression instantly froze. This is my Bai clan's secret technique. I knew that this was a secret magic of your White Clan. But do you have any other choice? Night Ghost Spirit Emperor smiled sinisterly. I know you expected me to lock your soul after you died, and then find a chance to devour you. That's why you put a curse on your soul, didn't you? President Bai was speechless. His curse had been very discreet, but he hadn't expected Night Ghost Spirit Emperor to still see through it. But back then, this curse hadn't been deliberately aimed at President Bai. Anyone who destroyed his soul would be cursed. President Bai had initially thought that if he was defeated in his battle with that youngster and that the latter wouldn't let go of his soul, he would at least be able to cast a curse on the youngster, so that he would be plagued with calamities and misfortune, which could be considered revenge for what he had done to him. As for Night Ghost Spirit Emperor's imagination, it was actually reasonable. Although this curse wasn't meant to be cast on Night Ghost Spirit Emperor, it was in fact meant to guard against him. Thus, when he had cast the curse back then, President Bai had already thought of many subsequent possibilities. Bai Zhi, you are indeed clever. But compared to me, he's still a bit too inexperienced. Of course, as long as you clearly write down the Bai clan's creation art, word for word, I can let bygones be bygones. I can even reconstruct your body and spare your dog life. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor raised his hand and a soul brush fell, his tone brooking no refusal. So, write it. President Bai took a deep breath. He had no way to argue, and could only do it. The creation art was a new spell developed during the Bai clan's heyday back then, and was later revered as the clan's ancestral secret skill. In the clan, President Bai was originally just a son of a concubine, and had never had the opportunity to learn. His mother had a lowly status and was just a favored songstress. Even after her death, she couldn't enter the clan's ancestral hall, and the memorial tablet could only be placed in President Bai's room. As he wrote down this secret skill, Baizhi recalled his experience when he had first met Night Ghost Spirit Emperor. At that time, Night Chief had just started out, and Night Ghost Spirit Emperor had been recruiting people everywhere. That was when the Bai clan's internal strife happened. As for why Night Ghost Spirit Emperor had chosen him in the end, President Bai had been investigating for the last 100 years, and had finally learned the truth. Your Excellency, I'm done. Baizhi quickly presented the Jade Scroll. The creation of a spell was nothing more than a few core nomological formulas. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor had a high opinion of himself, and if he wrote down everything, the other party would be displeased. So Baizhi just wrote down the core formula for the spell on the scroll, which made Night Ghost Spirit Emperor's eyes light up. The basic formula for a spell was the same, and only the core nomological formulas were the quintessence. This was like writing the universal chord in a musical melody, 4-5-3-6-2-5-1. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor was very satisfied with President Bai's performance. Baizhi, you're a smart man. Your Excellency praises me too much. President Bai's face was expressionless as he knelt on the ground like a slave obediently obeying his master's orders, as obedient as a puppy. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor sighed endlessly at this scene. He had chosen Baizhi back then because he had taken a fancy to Baizhi's rebellious nature. Who would have thought that after being thrown into the soul repository, this nature would be worn away instead? Night Ghost Spirit Emperor stared at this scene, his heart filled with disappointment and frustration. Actually, this was also good. At the very least, he now had another reason to keep Baizhi alive. At that moment, Night Ghost Spirit Emperor's soul injury had already recovered by nearly 40%, and he already had the strength. He got up from the ground and started to learn the core formula for the creation art which Baizhi had given him. A true immortal expert could learn spells at an extremely heaven-defying speed. Especially someone as experienced as Night Ghost Spirit Emperor, who only needed a few glances to break down these formulas, memorize them, and learn them at the speed of light. A torrent of blue spirit energy turned into steam and rose from Night Ghost Spirit Emperor's 7 orifices. Is this the Bai clan's creation art? Night Ghost Spirit Emperor was overjoyed. His injuries really were recovering at a rapid pace. But this state of joy didn't last long, as Night Ghost Spirit Emperor soon discovered that something was wrong. Although the injuries to his skin, flesh, tendons, and bones were rapidly healing, the injuries to his soul seemed to be on the verge of breaking apart. All of a sudden, Night Ghost Spirit Emperor's vision went black, and his entire body felt weak and exhausted. At that moment, President Bai finally stood up and smiled. Lord Spirit Emperor, is my Bai clan's creation art still useful? Night Ghost Spirit Emperor finally realized the reason for this abnormality. He glared at President Bai with wide, angry eyes. What did you do? Back then, Your Excellency viewed the Bai clan as a great threat. You only kept me as your loyal dog and purged the rest of the clan. But before you purged my ancestor, Your Excellency should have carefully investigated my Bai clan's history. Hands behind his back, President Bai had a smug expression on his face. Has Your Excellency heard of the reverse polarity? Night Ghost Spirit Emperor seemed to think of something, and finally looked alarmed. This Baizhi, as expected, he was evil. Chapter 759. On the other side, Wang Ming's second shot was a success, which had used up 28% of his spirit power reserves. Now, he only had 12% left, which he had to use to break through the space wall and fight his way out. A space fissure appeared, and at the same time, Wang Ming's mecha armor gave him a system prompt: space fissure ahead, estimated time until fissure closes, 243 seconds. Remaining energy, 12%. This was the mecha armor's built-in computing system, but it wasn't artificial intelligence at all. If it could be combined with a satellite design, it would be even more humane and intelligent. But for now, Wang Ming could only do this with the junk from the Dead Sea of Space. Just as the system had said, although the spatial rift had opened, it wouldn't last for long. This was the best time to rush out. You are not allowed to leave. Just as he was about to move, Ghosthead Blade's angry roar came from below. There was a flash of light as Ghosthead Blade made a show of using the last bit of his strength to keep Wang Ming here. Your Excellency Sword Master, leave quickly. I'll cover the rear. Heavenly Materials pushed Wang Ming forward. That won't do. If you want to leave, we'll leave together. Wang Ming grabbed Heavenly Material. He knew that Heavenly Material's former self was Kuan Shan, a pitiful sword spirit who had been cheated by his master and had sunk into silence in the Dead Sea of Space for 100 years. In the end, he had been so lonely that he had self-destructed. Wang Ming really couldn't bear to leave Heavenly Material here. But there was no more time to think about it. Just at that moment, another space fissure appeared in the air, and a snow-white stream of light swiftly streaked past Wang Ming's eyes before finally striking Ghosthead Blade with unerring accuracy. Ah! Ghosthead Blade let out a miserable howl of pain. Wang Ming, Heavenly Materials, what was that? Someone had crushed Ghosthead Blade to death. Moreover, this stream of light did not seem to be a spell, but a concealed weapon. Unfortunately, this mysterious expert's attack was just too fast. The current mecha's ability was completely unable to capture and locate the hidden weapon's image. Heavenly Materials was quick to react. He swept up a sword chi and grabbed at the void. His hands were immediately stained with some white powder. Heavenly Materials frowned, feeling that this thing was a bit like chalk dust. Could it be young Masterling? Heavenly Materials suddenly asked. Wang Ming, do you know my little brother? Heavenly Materials smiled faintly, reporting to the Sword Master, after I became the sword spirit of this sword, I became the sword spirit of this sword. From the day this sword was successfully forged, everything that happened has been sealed in my mind as a memory. This shouldn't be my brother's doing. Wang Ming shook his head. If it had been my younger brother, he would have been even more ruthless. This Ghosthead Blade probably wouldn't even have been able to scream before he died on the spot. Heavenly Materials, Wang Ming raised his eyebrows. No matter who the mysterious person was, he had no time to worry about it now. The most important thing right now is to get out of here. Thinking this, Wang Ming raised his eyes and operated the mecha armor side by side with Heavenly Materials as they plunged into the space fissure. At the same time, in the real remains, the living cells that had fled earlier had almost all been cleaned up. Fortunately, Wu Zhenjuan had given timely instructions this time, and the inside of the remains hadn't suffered too much damage. However, the aftermath of Night Chief's actions this time would be immeasurable, and what they really needed to guard against were the international gossip that would follow. Devil Valley's Beast King's remains, this feng shui treasure land had long been eyed by various countries. Now that something had happened, Mishio Nation definitely wouldn't let go of this opportunity, and would appeal to the international community to set up a joint army to manage it. In the dense forest to the east of Beast King's remains, Odshua's special operations team had cleaned up almost half of the living cells. That was because they had Wuji on their side, who was like a living human radar. It was too easy for her to sense the summoned cells that had fled. Wu Zhenjuan, I've finished cleaning up here and executed these living cells on the spot. But how do you think we should deal with these corpses? In the rainbow glass box, Wu Zhenjuan quickly replied, thank you for your hard work, Director Zhua. These cell corpses don't need any special treatment, they contain a lot of organic matter, which can be used as fertilizer. I see. Audra nodded. Wu Zhenjuan nodded. Also, we just detected a strange spatial fluctuation in the west, but we're not sure if it has anything to do with Teacher Wang's disappearance. Can Director Zhuo lead a team to check it out? The teachers we sent out previously have been ordered by the higher-ups to summon them back for the meeting. If Director Zhuo can't go, I can only send someone over the next day. Zhuo hurriedly replied, Wu Zhenjuan, what are you talking about? Since we're the Special Operations team, we naturally have a reason to take action. Saving people is like fighting a fire. Wu Zhenjuan was overjoyed. In that case, thank you very much, Director Zhuo. After the call ended, Zhuo looked at the people around him. Wu Zhenjuan said that he detected spatial fluctuations in the west of the remains, and suspects that they have something to do with Lord Wang Ming. I also felt the fluctuations not long after they appeared. Wu Ji frowned.